maritime protections that were not contained in the legislation passed in 2023.
Alex Burkhardt.
I think it's clear from the Right Honourable Gentleman's answer that the Armed Forces Minister quit because he could see that the bill remains unfit for purpose and that it fails to protect the very veterans that it claims to protect. That the Secretary of State must now realise there is no cross-party support in Northern Ireland for his legislation, nor is there support within the Labour Party for his legislation. Will he now accept that this bill should not progress and that we should return to the legislation that the Conservatives brought forward?
I do not accept that, because all of the Northern Ireland political parties were opposed to the immunity that was the heart of the 2023 Legacy Act. Had no support from political parties in Northern Ireland, nor from victims and survivors' organisations. That is why these changes have to be made, and that is why the government is going to proceed with this bill.
Paul Cole, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in March, the member for Macclesfield travelled to Belfast to address the Alliance Party conference. In that speech, he warned that it is too easy for the powers that be to write their own rules and cover up. Now, he was talking about the need for a Hillsborough law, which, as he said at the time, is currently stalled in Parliament due to an unacceptably wide carve-out for the security services. These benches are deeply concerned that exactly that issue now confronts veterans who, under this government's draft Troubles Bill, are currently exposed to investigation and prosecution, while the state that gave the orders shelters behind similar such carve-outs. So will the Secretary of State confirm whether or not he will now support the Lib Dem amendment to this bill, requiring any decision to block disclosure on national security grounds be referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee to ensure proper parliamentary scrutiny?
Well, we will come to debate that amendment along with all the others that honourable and right honourable members have submitted when we get to the committee stage. But the judgment in the Thompson case was absolutely clear, and it was also referred to by the Dillon judgment, that the ultimate responsibility for protecting national security rests with the government. That is a long-established principle that has support on both sides of the House. But at the same time, I've made it clear I wish to see the maximum possible disclosure consistent with that requirement that falls upon ministers.
Gavin Robbins.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State will know that, given our legacy of our past, there are two governments involved in this. Was he concerned, as we were, that Sir Declan Morgan to the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee 2 weeks ago shared with us his concern that he will not have access to unredacted material, intelligence material from the Irish Government, and that there is nothing within their draft legislation, or indeed the amendments that are due to come before this House, that would change that around? Is he further concerned that the official Chief Operating Officer of the Northern Ireland Office said that day she would take it back to whom we do not know, because she's the Chief Operating Officer, but today she has written to the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee and confirmed that nothing within his amendments, or indeed the Irish Government's, would satisfy Sir Declan's requirement for access to unredacted material from the Irish?
Well, I say to the right honourable gentleman that the Irish Government published, as he knows, on the 8th of June, their legislative outline, the general scheme titled The Legacy of the Troubles Bill, and that is intended to fulfil the commitment that the Irish Government gave in the joint framework to cooperate to the fullest extent possible with the Commission. What he is referring to is the position today in the light of the Dillon judgment, and I happen to agree with him now that the Dillon judgment has made it quite clear that the Commission, even in its current form, is compliant with the ECHR and capable of carrying out investigations. I would hope that we would see cooperation in response to the request that ICRA is currently making of the Irish Government.
David Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, I think that is an answer to a question. It's not really the answer to mine. What I would like to hear from our Secretary of State is a full-throated recognition that there is a deficit and that Sir Declan needs access to that unredacted material, and that he will secure agreement from the Irish Government for such a change. But does he recognise, as we stand here today in July, that with no remedial order before the Lords by the end of June, that deadline has passed? With no progress before the Irish assumed the European presidency, which apparently was another deadline that needed to be met, it has passed. With no summit on the 22nd of July, there is no chance that his Troubles Bill will be legislation in 2026.
Well, the right honourable gentleman makes a very powerful argument as to why the Troubles Bill should be passed, because it will enable precisely the information sharing with the Irish authorities that he wants to see, I want to see, and all of the people who are still waiting for answers in Northern Ireland would like to receive, and that is one of the central arguments for proceeding with the bill.
Marshal de Cordova.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 3 and 5 together. I meet regularly with the Northern Ireland Executive and the PSNI to discuss a range of issues in Northern Ireland, including community cohesion. However, given the recent serious disorder, there is a problem here that needs to be tackled.
Marshal de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The scenes we witnessed in Belfast last month were truly horrific, and the knife attack was an abhorrent act, and I pay tribute to the courage of those who intervened to help. But, Mr. Speaker, what followed in the days afterwards was equally disturbing. Innocent people were targeted because of the colour of their skin, families were literally burnt out of their homes, and businesses were attacked. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that overt racism and violence has no place on the streets of Belfast or anywhere in our society, and that those in positions of authority and influence should stop inflaming tensions and legitimising racism and prejudice?
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend. The attack on Mr Ogilvie was truly shocking, but there was no justification whatsoever for the racist thuggery that we witnessed on the streets of Belfast in the days following. And I have to say to the House that meeting nurses and doctors from a hospital in Belfast, nurses who described to me that some of them, because of the colour of their skin, were too afraid to leave the hospital at the end of their shift, and others discussed, well, should I leave in the back of a colleague's car covered in a coat or in the boot because we're afraid of the thugs who have taken control of the streets? That should give us all cause for deep concern that it happened on the streets of our United Kingdom in 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for that answer? But can I ask, what assessment has he made of the level of online coordination that we saw in the recent unrest in Belfast? And what discussions has he had with the Police Service of Northern Ireland and other security partners in terms of addressing this issue?
Well, I say to my honourable friend that was, of course, an awful feature of what we saw. One of the things I learnt in my discussions was that those from the far right had taken a list of houses in multiple occupation in Belfast that was properly available on the Belfast City Council website. In the interest of openness, they've now taken it down and used that to try and target houses while this racist violence was taking place. There is a clear obligation on the social media companies set out in the Online Safety Act. There is an obligation on Ofcom to enforce that act, because there is no doubt that part of the violence was fuelled by that kind of online hatred.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State is plainly taking this very seriously, which is very much to his credit. Now, in the discussions that he and his ministers have reported to have had with the party leaders in Northern Ireland, can he say what points of agreement and dissent there were, and what actions the government, the UK government, undertook to advance in order to try to reduce the possibility of these dreadful scenes that, for many of us who lived through it, are reminiscent of the 1970s in Belfast, do not happen again?
Well, the honourable gentleman raises a really important point, and I'm grateful to him for his question. The fact is, we all have a responsibility, political leaders, for calling out what was witnessed for what it is, and not to mince our words. For social media companies, I've already indicated, to make sure that such material, if it is illegal, is not available on social media sites. I pay tribute to the police, the community organisations. They did an extraordinary job on the 9th of the 10th to find shelter for people who had been burned out of their homes. There's also a responsibility on parents, because if your son comes back at 11 o'clock of night wearing dark clothing, smelling of smoke, a parent might ask, where have you been and what have you been doing?
Community cohesion is very important, both racially and politically. Would the Secretary of State agree with me that while everyone accepts that political leaders and others have to be very cognizant of what they say and also what they do, and whenever we are all remembering our dead as we do, no one denies Republicans the right to remember their dead. But if a political leader like the First Minister of Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill not only remembers Republican dead, but lauds, praises and defends their indefensible actions, that does great harm to community cohesion.
Well, Northern Ireland is a society, as the Honourable Gentleman knows better than most, that has been undergoing a profound change since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement 28 years ago. And there is a legacy, as in the famous lines, we have a shared history, but not necessarily a shared memory. And the progress we have seen is because Northern Ireland society has been working to move beyond that. But one of the people I met who was there on the night of the violence said, we now have another other in Northern Ireland. The Honourable Member will be familiar with the traditional divisions. There is now another other, which is the ethnic minority population of Northern Ireland, that is terrified about what's happening, and we don't want to add to the travails of the past by not being very clear how unacceptable it is to see that on the streets of Belfast today.
Hannah.
Community cohesion is deeply threatened by the violence and menace on the streets last month, including the deliberate orchestration and including by paramilitary flags and trappings that now fly as bold as brass from lampposts in my constituencies and in many others, and we can no longer pretend the loyalist paramilitaries are not a national security threat. But cohesion is also threatened by a sheer lack of delivery and lack of responsibility taking by the Northern Ireland Executive. The Secretary of State must now also see the role that vetoes and the structures play in that, and in the moment of peril we may now be in Stormont. When will he convene the process for democratic reform of the institutions that a majority of people, of parties and of MLAs have asked for?
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise this issue because now 5 of the main parties have come forward with various proposals for reform, and I've said to the party leaders that I wish to meet them to discuss those proposals. At the moment, time and effort is being expended on trying to sort out the problem of the budgets. On the question of paramilitary displays and flags, the PSNI now has new powers to remove them as a result of the recommendation of Jonathan Hall, the reviewer of terrorism.
Robin Swan.
Mr. Speaker, in his first answer, the Secretary of State said this was a problem that needed to be solved. A fortnight ago in my constituency, I arranged a round table that included the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, the Police, the Executive Office, the Department for the Communities and many other organisations and representative organisations including the Black Diamond Initiative. It was all very apparent, they all had their strategies, they all had their procedures, but what they didn't have was a coordinated response, that they were all looking to the Executive to actually pull all those organisations together. If that dysfunction at the top of our Executive isn't allowing that to happen, what actions will the Secretary of State take?
Well, there is a responsibility above all on the Northern Ireland Executive to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. So 40% of the time since the Good Friday Agreement, there being no executive in Northern Ireland hasn't helped to achieve that objective. I'll take one issue. There is an acute housing crisis in Northern Ireland, as there is in other parts of the United Kingdom. So taking action to enable more homes to be built, one of the issues that needs to be addressed is the fact that the water infrastructure system can't cope. Sort that out and you can build more homes.
Yeah. Mike Wood. Shut
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The attempted murder of Stephen Ogilvie in Belfast last month shocked people throughout the country. And the man accused of this horrific attack is thought to have crossed into Northern Ireland illegally from the south. So people from all communities are asking what more can be done to prevent people coming into the UK illegally across this land border. Following the terrible event in Belfast last month, will the government now commit to significantly enhanced operations on the border similar to those already run by the Republic?
Well, we have already increased the number of operations and arrests in Northern Ireland in the last 2 years compared with the previous period. About 1,000 people who have no right to be in Northern Ireland have been removed, including 500 who have been returned to the Republic of Ireland. The honourable member will be well aware of the importance of the open border, so it is intelligence-led policing at the ports, the airports, Operation Gull, and visits to workplaces that has resulted in more people being detained and removed.
For Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
My honourable friend is a powerful campaigner on this issue. The Secretary of State and I recognise the importance of fishing industries across the United Kingdom. He visited Kilkeel earlier this year with Minister Muir, where this was raised. Immigration changes are designed to ensure our domestic workforce has access to good jobs, and the Secretary of State has written to the Home Secretary about this issue.
Alison Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response. But unfortunately, jobs at Whitby Seafood, the country's largest scampi supplier to caterers, remain at risk. And that's because, as the Minister knows, around 70% of crews who operate out of Kilkeel who catch the nephrops or scampi are foreign workers who will no longer qualify under the new visa rules from the end of this year. And while efforts to hire more domestic workers are underway, a small number of bespoke seasonal visas could save the scampi industry. And will my honourable friend redouble his efforts to work with colleagues to secure a solution and protect these jobs in Northern Ireland and Whitby?
We have written, as I say, to the Home Secretary to set out these issues with her, and I'm sure my honourable friend will be making her case very powerfully as well. Can I also just say it is our duty to work with businesses across the UK to ensure that they are ready for these changes. We want our fishing industry to thrive and people here to benefit from those good jobs.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for his answer. The severe financial impact that the restricted skilled worker visas are having on family-owned trawlers in Portavogie, Ardclass and Kilkeel face a perfect storm. Fuel costs, newly imposed Isle of Man transit barriers. The Minister knows the issue. I met the Immigration Minister, the Honourable Lady met the Immigration Minister as well. There is a proposal that could be acceptable. Will the Minister add his support to that to ensure that the historic fleet in Portavogie, Ardglass and Kilkeel is permanently in a position to fish the seas round the coast of Northern Ireland and to ensure that our fishing sector has a secure and future? And we ask that very much.
Well, we support our fishing sector totally, as he will know. I'd be very interested to hear more about the proposals, and if the Minister is speaking with the honourable gentleman and my honourable friend, I will of course be trying to be part of those meetings to hear what I can hear.
Samuel Wilson. Question number 6, Mr. Speaker. Stay.
I meet regularly with the logistics sector and businesses trading between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, including through the Northern Ireland Business Stakeholders Group, to discuss how we can make the Windsor framework operate as smoothly as possible.
Yes, the Minister will be well aware of the importance of the industry in Northern Ireland and also the burdens which it is falling under at present because of the Brexit arrangements, which have pushed up costs, led to delays and also meant that many containers are coming back empty from GB, on top of which we now have a carbon tax on ferries coming to Northern Ireland and from Northern Ireland, adding to costs. Does he recognise that the logistics industry is important to Northern Ireland? It's being strangled by the arrangements with the EU and by the net zero policies, and what steps does he intend to take to address those issues?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman on the ETS, yes, we are applying a carbon charge to boat movements between GB and Northern Ireland, the same that is being applied between GB and the Republic of Ireland. But the reason for that is to ensure that the carbon border adjustment mechanism does not hit businesses in Northern Ireland, which he would be very cross about if that were to be the case. I would simply say to him, if things are as bad as he describes, why is Northern Ireland one of the fastest growing parts of the United Kingdom economy?
Question 7, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 7 and 11 together. I meet the leaders of the main Northern Ireland political parties on Thursday the 11th of June to discuss the terrible disorder. The attack on Mr Ogilvie was truly shocking, but the racist violence we saw in response had no justification whatsoever.
Ready. Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Roma have suffered centuries of prejudice and hate under the Nazis, who were subject to concentration camps and genocide. Roma people have made their home in my constituency and in Northern Ireland and should be treated with decency. Yet they have been subject to terrible racist violence in Northern Ireland. What steps is my right honourable friend taking with the Northern Ireland Executive to safeguard the Roma community in Northern Ireland?
I think the single most important thing that we can all do as political leaders is to be absolutely clear that everyone who has made the United Kingdom their home lawfully should be treated with equality, respect and dignity regardless of where they come from. That is one of the characteristics of our country.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I can't begin to imagine what the victims of the recent disorder felt and experienced and the devastation that had brought upon their communities. My Labour values are about respect for others, about treating people fairly and justly. This act was none of them. Can my right honourable friend please say what is being done to rebuild, to restore these communities in every aspect, from their trauma to their protection and to their loss of possessions as well?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for what she says, and I agree with her. If one takes the example of Ballymena, there was terrible disorder there last year, as a result of which a number of steps were taken to bring the community together. And it was noticeable that in the recent disorder we saw in Belfast, it was not replicated in Ballymena. Now, that is an example of communities working together to build that trust and respect. We need to see a lot more of it.
Colin Lockhart.
Mr Speaker, does the Secretary of State accept that while there can never be any excuse for criminal disorder, there is equally no excuse for a border policy that leaves Northern Ireland exposed? How many more incidents will it take before he and this government actually deal with the open border with the Republic of Ireland, which is being exploited daily? And when will this government put in place measures to protect our citizens from illegal immigrants?
The Honourable Lady, I hope, will recognise that the common travel area, which is more than a century old, is of great benefit to the citizens of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. Many people in Northern Ireland live their lives across that border every single day. And anyone who would suggest, and I know that she isn't, that somehow there should be immigration controls on that border is not being realistic, and it would not be the appropriate action to take. What we are doing, as I indicated in answer to an earlier question, is increasing immigration enforcement activity across the United Kingdom, including in Northern Ireland, as a result of which 1,000 people have been removed in the 2 years since the election, including 500 returned to the Republic of Ireland.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Secretary of State join me in commending the officers of the PSNI who have responded to recent disorder with professionalism and integrity? Does he agree with me that they deserve the very best support, including a modern, high-quality training facility? And can he give this House an update when that is going to be funded?
Well, I join the honourable gentleman in his thanks and praise to the brave officers of the PSNI. My honourable friend and I visited the police officers at Strandtown Police who dealt with the disorder when the bus was set on fire on the 10th of June, and over 40 of them were injured, and we wish them a speedy recovery. I know that the honourable member is a doughty advocate for the new training centre, and I look forward to discussing the matter further with him.
Happy birthday to the Leader of the House. We now come to the Deputy Prime Minister's questions, and we start with Paul Holmes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 1, sir.
Deputy Prime
Minister. Mr Speaker, I've been asked to reply on behalf of the Prime Minister, who's attending the NATO Summit. Working with our allies, we're strengthening Europe's role in the alliance that remains the cornerstone of our national security. Yesterday, the Prime Minister met with the Prime Minister of Norway and I'm sure this House will join me in wishing good luck to the England team ahead of the World Cup quarter-finals. Mr. Speaker, this week we mark the awful anniversary of 7/7, a day when people travelling through London on a bright summer morning had their lives ended and changed forever, including my best friend, James Adams. We remember all those affected by those terrible attacks, and we will always stand against terrorism. And Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party also pays tribute to Sir George Howarth. He was a champion for Knowsley, a distinguished colleague, and a wonderful, wonderful gentleman. We'll miss him deeply, and our condolences are with his wife, Julie, and his family. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Paul Holmes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I entirely associate myself with the Deputy Prime Minister's opening and personal remarks? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and the Right Honourable Gentleman from Makerfield are both proud football fans. So given that the Deputy Prime Minister clearly thinks the Prime Minister has always been match fit, how does he feel that his own MPs are given the boss the red card and brought on a left winger to get them out of the relegation zone?
That's not bad for someone who represents a Premier League side. But 2 years since the election, the honourable member still needs to engage with the facts of the Tories' failed period in government. As his colleagues now accept this, the former Treasury Minister, the former Community Secretary, the former Health Minister, the former Immigration Minister, and that's just the member for Newark. He wrecked the country, helped wreck the Tory party, and now wants to do it all over again with reform.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 3 weeks' time, Greater Manchester residents will have the chance to vote for Labour's brilliant candidate, Bev Craig, to be I've worked with Bev for many years, so I know her strong record as a leader and what an outstanding mayor she'll be. Will the Deputy Prime Minister join me in welcoming Bev's pledge to extend free travel on public transport to all 11 to 18-year-olds? So all our young people in Greater Manchester can have the independence to travel to the work, education and leisure opportunities they deserve.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. Bev Craig will be a brilliant mayor for Greater Manchester. I'm proud that Labour is putting power over bus services back in the hands of local leaders. This government has extended franchising powers, capped fares, invested to deliver better services, and we're ensuring children can enjoy free bus travel this summer. I'm sure colleagues will want to get behind Bev in Greater Manchester so that we can defeat Reform's divisive candidate and drive the agenda forward under a new mayor.
Shadow Secretary of State, Sir James Cleverly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to echo the Right Honourable Gentleman's tribute to Sir George Howarth and pass on my party's condolences to his friends, family and loved ones. I also wish to echo his support and encouragement to the England football team in their forthcoming match against Norway. And of course, I will echo his words about those people murdered on 7/7, their friends, their families, but also pay tribute to the emergency services that did so much on that day. Will he apologise to the victims of the rapists, sexual predators and paedophiles that he is planning to release early?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to welcome the Shadow Housing Secretary to the dispatch box. He, of course, could have been doing this job every week if he were better with numbers. He's the Foreign Secretary. He was the Foreign Secretary in government that botched Brexit, the Home Secretary in a government that decimated neighbourhood policing, and one of the shortest-serving education secretaries in our history. Now, he asks about a very serious issue, and every decision we have taken has been based on public safety and delivering justice for victims. Let's talk about the context. The last Labour government built 28,000 prison places. We're building 14,000 by 2031. We've already delivered 3,200. Under the Tories, they closed 23 prisons. 23. Gloucester closed. Shrewsbury closed. Portsmouth closed. Holloway closed. Northallerton closed. And what are they now? A block of flats. That's why we have to have an early release scheme. That's why we passed the Sentencing Act. And we're putting community powers locally to make sure that we protect the public.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he makes a joke about use of figures. Let me give him a figure. 50,000 prisoners released early in just 2 years on his watch. And I am genuinely shocked. Mr. Speaker, that when given the opportunity to apologise to victims, he very publicly failed to do so. And let me remind him what this is about. Let me quote Fiona Goddard, herself a victim of grooming gangs, who has been brave and open about how his policy will impact her. And she says, "Finding out that they may be released early has completely set me back. I have barely left the house. I feel constantly anxious, frightened, and unsafe. I can barely sleep." This is the impact his policy is having on victims. He refuses to apologise. But why is he pursuing a policy which he must know is both wrong and dangerous?
This is a very serious issue, and the honourable gentleman is experienced in this House. He knows that while he was Home Secretary, they had an early release scheme that set out 10,000 offenders, 10,000 under his... They had 6 schemes within a year. They had a scheme that they announced on the 6th of June 2023, another scheme on the 17th of October 2023, another scheme on the 8th of March 2024, another in April, another in May, another in June, all before the election. And that's why Rishi Sunak, it's rumoured, called the election in the first place. They left a system with just 83 empty cells. That's what the Justice Secretary previous to me inherited when she came into office. That's why we had to pass the sentencing scheme. He hasn't said what they would do now to fix the system. Of course we think of every victim. And that's why we're notifying victims in discussion with all victims. I sat last week in my surgery with a victim of grooming gangs. All of us want to see offenders locked up. That's why we've got to have prison capacity.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about 10,000 early release over 14 years of Conservative government. They have released 50,000 in 2 years. And he knows it's wrong. He is a good man. He must know that it is wrong to release 5,000 serious criminals, including rapists, including paedophiles. And not only does he know it's wrong, but his party knows it's wrong. 400 Labour MPs and not one voted to support the government's policy in the vote last night. They know it's wrong. The country knows it's wrong, but he insists on pursuing it anyway. So if he will not change course, will he at least make this guarantee that not one rapist or paedophile will be released early later on this year?
He hasn't proposed what they would do if they were in office. They released 10,000 with 4 different schemes, no impact assessment when they released them, no victim contact when they released them, no warning. They did it on the sly. And let us be clear, yes, we've got more probation officers. They, of course, cut probation, decimated it because of Chris Grayling. We've invested £700 million in probation. We're rolling out the largest programme of tagging in our history. We're forcing offenders to stay boxed in certain areas rather than where victims are. We're creating alcohol, pub, football and driving bans. We're implementing income reduction orders, and we're expanding chemical castration for sex offenders. None of it happened when they were in power.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he will look back on this exchange, and I think he will be shocked by how this is coming across. No apology to the victims, no guarantee that paedophiles and rapists will not be released early. We all know that releasing dangerous criminals on purpose is the wrong thing. But not content with doing that, he is hell-bent on releasing dangerous criminals by accident. Yep. Last year, in response to the questions of my right honourable friend, the member for South Suffolk, he claimed that under Labour he had got a grip of accidental releases. Yet we now know there have been more accidental releases in the last 2 years than in the entirety of the last Parliament. So I give him another chance. Will he apologise to the country for his abject failure at keeping prisoners in prison where they belong?
I've got to say, this is rich coming from the honourable gentleman. They had 14 long years in power. They wrecked neighbourhood policing. He was Home Secretary. Prisons were at bursting point. That's why they called the general election. And they let out offenders in secret. And that is why we have the Sentencing Act that passed through this House and the House of Lords. What we're doing is we are getting thousands more bobbies on the beat. We're toughening up probation. They've decimated it. And we have to have the space to knock up dangerous criminals. That's why we passed the sentencing bill.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, it's the dangerous criminals that he is letting out early. So he refuses to apologise to victims, he refuses to guarantee that sexual offenders and rapists will not be released early. Another thing that the country and indeed this House knows instinctively is wrong is his personal crusade to scrap trial by jury. We know that it will not clear the backlog. We know that it undermines fundamental British freedoms, and we know the legal profession is united against it. So will he now admit that it is wrong, and will he commit to reverse his proposals to scrap trial by jury?
Well, let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. There is no proposal before this House to scrap trial by jury. The honourable member needs to do better and get on the detail. There is a threshold change. There is a threshold change. Margaret Thatcher made a change to jury trials. David Cameron made a change to jury trials. The vast majority of criminal cases in this country are dealt with by magistrates, again, which they cut. We're restoring the magistrate, and they can do more. We're investing in our courts. They ran our courts down. We're modernising our courts. We're introducing digital ID, and we need reform.
Sir James Cleverly.
Mr. Speaker, he talks in glowing terms about what he's claiming to do. What we are actually seeing this government doing is stripping money from where it's needed and squandering it on the welfare bill, which is ballooned by £20 billion this year alone. And he talks about getting over the detail. Here's a simple detail for him. When I was Home Secretary, we had more police officers than at any point in British history. Since taking over, that number has dropped by over 2,000 officers. Mr. Speaker, the dispatch box last week, my right honourable friend, the Leader of the Opposition, highlighted this government's failure to defend us internationally. Today, I have outlined his failure to defend us domestically. If the soon-to-be Prime Minister... Is he in the room anywhere? No. If the soon-to-be Prime Minister does not want to be complicit in his failure, he should come out and condemn this plan, not just hint that he opposes it. Because if Labour cannot protect the citizens of this country, either domestically or internationally, then what on earth is the point of them?
Mr. Speaker, he insists on proving that he can't count. We lost 16,000 police officers when they were in power. Mr. Speaker, the British people haven't forgotten what the party opposite did to our country. After 2 years of a Labour government, I'll compare our record every day of the week. Their record is the biggest fall in living standards in recorded history. Our record is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. Their record is wrecking our criminal justice system. Our record is bringing down violent crime. Their record is millions of people stuck on NHS waiting lists. Our record is cutting NHS waiting lists, the fastest rate in history. Their record is cutting defence. He was a reservist. They hollowed out the armed forces. Our record is the biggest boost to defence spending since the early 1990s. And their record is plunging hundreds of thousands of children into poverty. Our record is lifting 500,000 of children out of poverty. I'll take our record over theirs any day of the week.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Family C official report about the most depraved sexual abuse of children identifies serious failures by Glasgow City Council and other bodies. The report, Mr. Speaker, says one child victim banged on the windows, shouting at a health visitor not to leave. This was treated as streetwise and not a desperate cry for help. Staff described the same child with contempt, saying the child's behaviour was nasty and interfering. The children desperately needed compassion, love and safety, not contempt. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Council must accept robust, independent scrutiny of what has happened and independent scrutiny of the implementation of improvements?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this case involves horrific offences against vulnerable children. I know all members of this House will join me in paying tribute to the victims who've shown remarkable bravery in coming forwards. It's evident that these children were dreadfully failed, and Glasgow City Council must urgently act on the recommendations of this review. I know my honourable friend has written to the Scottish Government to request an independent inquiry. The SNP should consider this request with the gravity that it deserves.
Daisy Cooper, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself and my party with the Deputy Prime Minister's tribute to Sir George Howarth, his remarks about the 7/7 bombings and all those who live with the consequences of that terrible day, and wish England good luck for Saturday evening. And as the UK braces for its 7th Prime Minister in a decade, can I also thank the Deputy Prime Minister for our exchanges and wish him well in whatever role he may have. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for Clacton used to say... Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for Clacton used to say, leave means leave. But it seems his latest stunt is to leave this place just so that he can return as a fully fledged member after not just one referendum on his behaviour, Mr. Speaker, but possibly 2. So will the Deputy Prime Minister join us in urging the Chancellor to delay the Honourable Member for Clacton's resignation until the investigation is complete, so the good people of Clacton have all the facts before they cast their votes, and failing that, will he support our Clacton clause so that even once the Honourable Member ceases to be an MP, the investigations can continue?
Well, everyone can see that the Reform leader is just trying to distract from the fact that he's up to his neck in sleaze. He's got serious questions to answer and he can't run away from them. Labour isn't going to be part of this circus. I hear it's the people versus the establishment, the city trader Putin admiring professional politician who's pals with crypto billionaires versus Count Binface. There have been unqualified joke candidates in the past. Let's see what the people of Clacton decide.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear it's a 2-horse race. Mr. Speaker, on a more serious and very sombre note. on a sombre note, Mr. Speaker. On a sombre note, MI5 has defended in court an agent that they knew to be openly misogynistic, obsessed with violence, and who used his position to coercively control his girlfriend Beth and attack her with a machete. To add insult to injury, MI5 also gave false evidence to the court. So will the Deputy Prime Minister use this opportunity to offer Beth a full apology on behalf of the government? And will he use his position to bring back a full Hillsborough Bill next week, which covers the security services, so that we can pass the law before the summer recess?
Well, she raises a very serious issue, of course, and I will arrange for Beth to meet with the Security Minister to discuss this in detail. She also raises the Hillsborough Bill, and I'm confident that this will be before the House in the coming days.
Emily Darwich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister and most of us across this House have been victims of AI-generated fake news, aka deepfakes. These mislead the public and they disrupt our democracy. BBC News coverage and coverage from other news channels is also being AI manipulated to tell untruths. Will he, alongside MPs from across this House, support the amendments I've tabled to the Representation of Peoples Act, which would force anything that is AI created to be labelled as such and stop the production of deepfakes of ourselves and colleagues, and stop the UK from these destructive tactics used by foreign states and others who wish to see our democracy made weaker?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. She's right that our protections must keep pace with evolving threats, including deepfakes. I know she's been in close discussions with ministers on this issue, and we will look at her amendment closely. We're absolutely focused on protecting our democracy against foreign interference.
Dr. Ellie Charge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our politics needs fixing fast. The broken, outdated first-past-the-post system has clearly failed to deliver stable government. We urgently need to rebuild trust in our democracy and ensure that everybody's vote counts equally. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield that proportional representation is an idea whose time has come? And does he agree with me and members across this House that time is now, before the next general election?
Well, I'm very pleased that she raises the issue of votes and democracies. But I've got to say this to the Greens. During the local elections, a Green councillor in Lewisham described me and the Shadow Foreign Secretary as coconuts. Her party looked the other way, kept her candidate in post, and have rewarded that candidate with a council job. I'm not making this up, the Cabinet Member for Healing. The Greens could start a healing process by stopping such racist language.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks the second anniversary of our Labour government, and 2 years on, my Western Bartonshire constituents now enjoy greater rights at work. Thousands of workers are now better off thanks to increases in national minimum wage. Thousands of children lifted out of poverty. Tens of millions of pounds in Pride in Place funding to communities previously left behind. Shipbuilding on the Clyde secured with the Norwegian naval deal. Billions of pounds investment in Fast Lane. As well as a new youth hub set to open next month.
I think even the one of us is sitting down, it's not me. I think the Deputy Prime Minister could even answer that because he wants to answer.
Well, can I commend my honourable friend for the difference that he's made, including his hard work to bring Pride of Place funding to his constituency. He lists an amazing record in 2 years, and we've got 3 more to go, Mr. Speaker.
James Benn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Understandably, over the past week, rules and regulations have come under sharp focus. But even more important than the rules and regulation is the law. And on that topic, I believe there are a number of things where everyone in the House can agree and everyone in the House can feel proud. Phrases such as without fear and favour, and symbols such as Lady Justice wearing a blindfold. Now, I'd like to ask the Deputy Prime Minister, however well-meaning actions from the MPCC and the College of Policing with their programmes such as the Race Action Plan may be, we have seen some very high-profile cases where civil unrest has, where faith in police has been shaken by what appears to be two-tier decision-making. So may I ask in good faith what the Deputy Prime Minister can do to reassure people that without fear and favour will always be maintained?
What can I say to the honourable gentleman? Everyone is equal before the law. That is the foundation on which openness, tolerance and generosity of this country is rested. And let's be clear, there is no two-tier justice in this country. And can I say, the honourable member was elected as a reform member of Parliament, and he clearly aspires to become one once more. Given reports that concerns were raised with the National Crime Agency about Nigel Farag's £5 million gift, he should be asking, where did the money really come from?
No law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm deeply grateful for what the Prime Minister has helped us deliver in Cornwall the past couple of years, whether that's free breakfast clubs, urgent capital funding for GP surgeries, or the Kerno Industrial Growth Fund. However, what's held us back at various points, not beside the chuntering from the other side, I would argue completely unnecessarily, is something to which the answer is patently obvious to all in Cornwall, the question of who should be the masters of Cornwall's strategic destiny. Does he agree with me that the answer to this question must always be Cornwall? And will he make time for the government to lay the statutory instrument required to make Cornwall once and for all a strategic authority, so that when the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield comes in, that we can ensure that good growth in every postcode and reindustrialisation of Cornwall?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend? He's right to champion the huge potential of Cornwall. We're absolutely committed to devolution and putting power in the hands of local leaders. Conversations with local authorities, including Cornwall, are ongoing, and we will confirm next steps as soon as possible. I know ministers will be happy to update him.
Dr. Ros Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency of the South Cotswolds is the 9th most sewage polluted constituency in the entire country, with thousands of hours of sewage pouring into the Thames, Avon and Colne. But that metric of hours conceals the truth. It doesn't convey the actual volume, and clearly a trickle is very different from a gush. So will the Deputy Prime Minister arrange for me to meet with the relevant minister to require water companies to report on the volume and concentration of sewage discharges, as well as the number of hours?
Well, she's right. We inherited record levels of pollution. We're determined to tackle this and clean our waterways. We've acted by banning unfair bonuses, introducing jail time for law-breaking bosses, unlocking $104 billion of private investment to rebuild vital infrastructure to deliver cleaner waters, and of course we've got the Clean Water Bill. Of course I'll arrange for her to meet with the Minister.
Cat Ettles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Stourbridge is famous for many things: the glass industry, Jude Bellingham, Robert Plant, and most importantly, the Stourbridge Shuttle, the UK's shortest railway line at just 0.8 miles, or 1.3 kilometres if you prefer metric, and it links Stourbridge Junction with Stourbridge Town. Despite its small size, it achieves an impressive 99.6% reliability compared to the West Midlands average of 64.4%. And one of my highlights as an MP was unveiling a shuttle car named after local legend George the Stourbridge Station Cat, whose global social media following made him a beloved fixture at the junction. And today marks the start of Shuttle Shorts, a short film festival celebrating the journey. The shuttle shows how community railway can improve local mobility. Does he agree? that the premature ambition to introduce a VLR service between Stourbridge and Brierley Hill is a valuable opportunity for GBR, and local businesses should be supported to do this.
First, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement about the future. It is coming home. And can I thank my honourable friend? I'm absolutely echo her sentiments on Jude Bellingham. He's not only making Stourbridge proud, but he's a source of pride for the whole nation. Great British Railways is in the biggest overhaul we're seeing of our railways in a generation. We'll work with all partners, including local authorities and local business, to drive investment, support economic growth and deliver better service for her constituents.
Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Constituents in the west side of North Shropshire were delighted when RIS3 was announced, because as part of the National Safety Programme, a roundabout at the desperately dangerous Hlunkus Crossroads became a step closer. But with the announcement that the Defence Investment Programme will be funded by cuts to transport programmes, can the Deputy Prime Minister reassure my constituents that the National Safety Programme won't be cut? And can he consider using the Liberal Democrat idea of defence bonds to fund the Defence Investment Plan, so that critical security projects like transport are not put at risk through the programme?
We are raising defence spending to keep this country safe in an increasingly volatile world. That does require tough decisions, and the Department of Transport will set out £700 million worth of savings for roads funding, but we will consult on the next road investment strategy and set our decisions in due course. I can reassure the Honourable Lady that safety of passengers would always come first.
Pam Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ruth Ellis was the last woman to be executed in this country. Her case serves as a haunting reminder of a time when our justice system ignored the realities of domestic abuse and coercive control. In the decades since, members of Ruth's family and supporters have campaigned unwaveringly for her to receive a posthumous pardon. Will the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that their courageous campaign and the terrible lessons of Ruth's case must strengthen the government's resolve to free women from devastating cycles of abuse?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. I have the honour to say that His Majesty the King has accepted our advice to grant Ruth Ellis a conditional pardon, the last woman to be hanged in the United Kingdom. While the pardon does not claim she was innocent of killing David Blakely, it replaces the death penalty with a sentence of life imprisonment to recognise a profound injustice in this exceptional case. I know her grandchildren, Laura Enston, Stephen Beard, are in the gallery with us today. We hope this brings a measure of peace to Ruth Ellis' family, who have carried the weight of what happened to her for over 70 years.
Gregory Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government have said that higher taxes are needed to fund rising welfare spending. In Northern Ireland, my party's Communities Minister is taking action to reduce welfare fraud and error. Previous discussions were held between Treasury and the Department that would have allowed Northern Ireland departments to retain a share of any savings to invest directly in public services, but those proposals were blocked by Sinn Féin. Would the Deputy Prime Minister ensure that the incoming Prime Minister will look at that approach again, so that we can tackle benefit fraud, protect taxpayers' money, as well as delivering real benefits for communities across all of Northern Ireland?
Well, I know that my honourable friend, the Minister for Northern Ireland, is discussing the budget at this very time, but tackling fraud and error in the welfare system is a priority for this government. That's why we passed the Fraud, Error and Recovery Act, giving the DWP more powers to stop fraud in its tracks, recover money lost and prevent overpayments.
Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday I was proud to host a number of Basingstoke's Nepalese community here in Parliament, including a number of Gurkha veterans. One of the issues we discussed was that of Gurkha pensions, and I pay tribute to the work of my honourable friend for Aldershot for all of her work on this issue. I've been proud to work alongside her. Does the Deputy Prime Minister agree that it is time to resolve the long-standing issue of Gurkha pensions, recognising the service and sacrifice of Gurkha veterans to our country?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. We owe a profound debt of gratitude to the Gurkhas, who have served this country courageously. We're listening to the needs of the community, and we're already improving access to healthcare and community support. Ministers have met with veterans in the government of Nepal for constructive discussions on pensions. Those will continue, and I'd be happy to ensure that my honourable friend is kept updated.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Coughlin's Bakery, which was founded in 1937, has announced the closure of all of its stores, 5 of which are in my Reigate constituency. The reasons given by Sean Coughlin include recent employer national insurance and business rate hikes. This much-loved family business that has survived a world war and multiple recessions hasn't been able to survive this Labour government. So I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, how many businesses need to go under before this government learns that it can't tax its way to growth?
We're backing business with the lowest corporation tax in the G7. We've delivered the small business plan with the largest crackdown on late payments in 25 years. We're bringing down costs of business through 5 major trade deals. We've secured $365 billion in private investments since the election, and unemployment down over 400,000 more people in work than this time last year.
Final question for Session Lammy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month I had the opportunity to host the South Bank Centre in my constituency, one of the many that I'm proud to have across Vauxhall and Campbell Green, for their 75th anniversary. The House may know that the South Bank Centre was built as part of the Festival of Britain 1951, which successfully saw people come together to share the identity after the ruins of the World War II. 75 years on, Mr. Speaker, sadly the world is a more divided place. Recently, we've seen 2 far-right marches, including one going through my constituency, leaving many members feeling afraid. But, Mr. Speaker, there is hope, as we see with the World Cup bringing people together, showing the power of culture and sport. So does the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me? Now's the moment to continue to invest in the things that bring us together, just as the government did in 1951.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for the tireless work that she does in this area. She's absolutely right. We must stand united against those who seek to divide us. Our Social Cohesion Action Plan sets out how we will tackle extremism, bring communities together and restore national pride, and we're providing local communities with up to £1.7 million to insulate them against the threats to social cohesion.
Right, that completes Deputy Prime Minister's questions. Let the front bench change over. Welcome to the urgent question. Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister tell the House what measures the government has put in place to ensure that in the coming holiday season, travellers and business freight are not delayed at our ports, our international railway stations, and our airports as a result of the imposition of the European exit and entry system?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the right honourable gentleman for his important question. The EU entry-exit system is an EU scheme, and its implementation is the responsibility of the European Commission and participating member states. This government has been working closely with the EU, with member states and with industry to understand the impacts, particularly for the juxtaposed border controls at the Port of Dover, at Eurotunnel and St Pancras, and to advocate for the pragmatic use of the flexibilities available within the legislation to minimise disruption for UK citizens. The government has supported all 3 juxtaposed ports to ensure that they have the right technology and processes in place to make sure EES registration runs as smoothly as possible, and this has included providing £3.5 million worth of funding to each of those ports to help them make changes to their infrastructure and purchase the equipment they need to be ready their sites for EES. It is not unusual to see queues at the Kent juxtaposed ports during peak times due to the unique geography, and this has been the case prior to EES. However, we want to minimise the impact of EES. At the late May bank holiday weekend, both ministers and officials engaged French authorities to ensure arrangements were in place to handle large volumes of traffic. This resulted in assurances from France that they would have adequate staffing levels and clear escalation plans in case of severe disruption. These arrangements were made use of on the 23rd of May when the French police aux frontières employed flexibilities available within the regulations to alleviate congestion on the road network. I, my officials and ministerial colleagues across government are actively engaging with France and the EU to make similar arrangements ahead of the summer period. The Department for Transport continues to support the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum, who have tried and tested plans in place to manage disruptions to the road network in Kent. For passengers travelling to Schengen countries by air, EES registration will take place in their destination. It will not take place in UK airports, and queues in EU member states are for those states to manage. However, this government continues to engage with the Commission and relevant member states to advocate for the pragmatic use of EES flexibilities allowed to avoid delays for passengers. We're also engaging our European partners on the use of technology to move elements of registration away from the border, such as the EES app. And we continue to encourage travellers to check with their travel operator before departing so they know when to arrive and any possible impacts on their journey.
Sir Roger Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Minister has indicated, over the spring bank holiday, there was chaos at Dover and at St Pancras and at the Channel Tunnel because of the failure of the EES. The French authorities were quite simply not prepared or able to implement the facilities properly. Given the predictions based upon bookings for the coming season, which starts in 10 days' time, the authorities are now predicting that it is likely there could be 12-hour delays to passengers and therefore accordingly to freight, which affects our business. That is simply not acceptable. Will the Minister now, before it's too late, approach again the French authorities and suggest that a waiver must be put in place before the holiday season starts so that we don't face again the chaos that we faced in May?
I'm grateful for that question, and I want to recognise that it is a shared goal for ourselves, I know for locally affected members of Parliament and indeed for the French, to make sure we don't see scenes of huge queues. And we know the impact that has on individuals and on businesses. What we have done, and the Honourable Gentleman talks about more efforts, and we will, I can assure him, be doing this on a daily basis, as we already are, both with France and with the Commission, pushed on this fundamental point, because whilst this is a complex scheme, and we're seeing that in its operation, it comes down to a fundamental point, that when you get to peak volumes, and the Honourable Gentleman mentions the volumes that are coming shortly, it fundamentally comes down to a question, Mr Speaker, of a prioritisation of flow or a prioritisation of compliance with the scheme itself. We push very heavily. We will do every day between now and then, I can say that to the right honourable gentleman, to make sure that the French use flexibilities available to prioritise flow. That's what I want, that's what he wants, and I think that's in everybody's interests.
Ruth Cadbury, Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Honourable Member for Herne Bay and Sandwich is quite right to highlight the challenge and the impact on Kent when these queues build up, and of course the impact on those British people trying to get out through Dover and Folkestone and other places as well. I want to ask the Minister a question about what can be done for British holiday makers coming home who have been stuck at airports for hours and hours, missed their flights because the airlines need to get moving because of working time directives. I'm led to understand that fingerprints are required on entry but are not required on exit from the Schengen area, and yet many of these delays are being caused because airports are in different countries are seeking the holidaymakers provide fingerprints again, as well as the much easier face recognition. Could the Minister pick this up, please, and tell me what is happening?
I'm grateful to chair that Select Committee for that characteristically thoughtful response, because, of course, a lot of ministerial focus, as you would expect, is around juxtaposed ports. Those are things that happen on UK soils and have an impact in UK communities. Nevertheless, we want our travel makers to have the best possible experience wherever they are. The checks in Schengen countries are a matter for them, but as I said in opening, we are engaging with all countries, not just France, to make sure that a proportionate and sensible use within flexibility is made. And then for our own impact, she will know, as other colleagues will know too, about the changes that we're making with our own e-gates, so that lowering that age, so that when passengers, possibly after having, as she characterised, a difficult journey out, have the smoothest when they're back on UK soil.
Max Wilkinson, Liberal Democrats. But, Shadow Minister.
Thank you. I thank the honourable member for Herne, Bay and Sandwich for securing this important urgent question. Anyone who has travelled or spoken to those who've tried to use the new European entry-exit system understands why the scale of the challenges over summer are so great. Despite all those problems, it has now been reported that a separate new online system to pre-authorise entry to the EU will be delayed until next year. This is a pitiful response, indicative of the problems facing so many UK travellers. There is nowhere near the urgency needed to address the problems facing the EES as we enter the summer holidays. As the President of Airports Council International Europe recently expressed, politicians should stop pretending that the EES is working just fine. It is not. This delusional attitude among EU colleagues is not acceptable. With the EU telling representatives of the travel industry that a full suspension of the system is not needed and not possible, the government must stand behind the interests of British travellers. For instance, there appears to be a ridiculous situation in which a facility built in Dover cannot be activated until the technology for the kiosks, which is the responsibility of the French authorities, is working. My honourable friend, the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, is right. It is time to apply maximum pressure before chaos arrives at the border at Dover. I hope the Minister can detail what conversations they've had, what pressure they will apply. Have they asked for a temporary suspension, relaxation or phased use of EES checks at periods of exceptional congestion? And given the increased traffic, what have the government done to strengthen plans in case queues spill out of Dover or Folkestone? It is in all our interest to ensure people can get through border checks quickly, so it's time to ensure that that happens.
Minister.
I'm grateful to the Shadow Minister for his questions there. I share his point, and he heard me say in opening, about the importance and the impact that pre-authorisation can have. We want that to become the norm. We are, as I said, engaging with Member States to encourage them to take that use of the EES app up. He asks about intent in our colleagues in the European Union, whether in the Commission or in Member States. I have to say I don't detect a lack of intent. They are very keen to engage with us. We engage with them very frequently indeed. They want this system to work. It's very important that it does. And it is worth saying, Mr. Speaker, it is a good thing that our neighbour wants really good security arrangements. We benefit from that too. But I do think we have that we certainly have that level of engagement. He talks about full suspension. I have to say, as I said to the Right Honourable member, the Chair of the Select Committee yesterday in Select Committee proceedings, I would not set that as the goal and the aspiration because I don't believe that's deliverable. What we delivered in May, what we will seek to do here, is that when we get to peak times and the system is clearly not managing flow appropriately, having the right flexibilities in place on the ground for PAF staff to make those changes that prioritise flow. That's my priority. He talks about the facility. Well, I would gently say it isn't going to be able to be used until the technology that it's used and based on works. Of course it's not. We want that to be the case as soon as possible. That is not a business for us. We have made the money available so that the infrastructure is there. It is there. We have delivered on that element, but the technology is still clearly taking time to stand up. He talks about pressure. Well, the engagement we have is at all levels of government. Yes, in the Home Office, and the Home Secretary is engaged with her counterpart and with the Commission, as has DFT colleagues, DFT Secretary of State, as has the Minister for the Cabinet Office. We are raising these on a daily basis. And then on the point on contingencies, I would take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to say what a good job that the Kent and Medway Resilience Forum have done on this. I am a big Resilience Forum enthusiast. Those are local people making direct local changes to improve their community when under pressure. There is Operation TAP, there is Operation Brock. Those arrangements are in place, and we will work with them so they can make the best operational decisions they can along the way.
Mr. Speaker, with the Home Affairs Select Committee, I visited the Port of Dover last week to see these operations in action. Given this is an EU entry-exit system, it is just a fact that we must face that this is an inevitable consequence of Brexit, and we have to make it work. So the best solution to the challenges facing our constituents this summer is sustained engagement.
Sorry about this. Can you both stop the little argument on the backbenches between you? Come on, Chris. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The best solution to managing the challenges this summer is sustained engagement with the French at leader level, at cabinet level, at ministerial level and working official level, so that the Police aux Frontières have the delegated responsibility to let flows through. Can the Minister tell us what discussions we'll be having at every level with the French using the better relationship we've struck, so that our constituents and British holidaymakers trying to get a holiday abroad this summer don't face the consequences of Brexit, which will be missed flights and long queues?
Minister.
Sustained engagement with the French is crucial. That is happening at all levels, be it ministerial, be it senior official, be it operationally, to ensure that prioritisation of flow. That is not something that has just started, nor is it something coming to its end. That is a constant position that we're in and have been in for many months, indeed, even before EES started its operations. That will continue. But I would gently say as well, it's not just the French, it's all EU member states, because at some point this summer, all of our constituents, well, many of our constituents will end up in all different member states. I want them to have the best possible experience, so we're having those engagements too.
Max Wilkinson, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is now 10 years on from the Brexit referendum. And in the words of the Right Honourable Member for Newark, where are we? Where are we? We're here. We're stuck in queues at the EU border for hours at a time because he and his acolytes forced a damaging Brexit on this country. It is interesting to note, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives have come to the Chamber today complaining about the consequences of the Brexit deal they negotiated. It is the member for Clacton's Brexit plan, implemented by the Conservatives and unresolved by this government, which has left British holidaymakers in this position. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this government is guilty not of just failing to plan, but of political and diplomatic failures which have let down holidaymakers. We are already seeing reports of queues of up to 5 hours. What a way to start our holidays. So what immediate steps is the Minister taking to mitigate disruption? Will he seek an immediate meeting with the European Commission so that contingency measures that can be put in place protect passengers as a matter of urgency? And will this government drop its red lines on Europe and commit to joining the single market and customs union? Not only, Mr. Speaker, would this reverse the damage done by Brexit and get our economy back on track, but it would mean that we would not be so...
Sir, you've gone way over your 1 minute. I think your border queue's just gone, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, just to address this point on Brexit, we do have to be clear. For example, the Republic of Ireland, who are outside of Schengen, they have these challenges too. So the idea that reverting to previous arrangements would change this reality, actually, I think that's tricky. There's fundamentally a choice here. We have a real practical thing that will affect the honourable gentleman's community, many honourable and right honourable colleagues' communities, and lots of British holidaymakers. And we can choose to use our efforts and our leadership collectively to have conversations about the past, or we can work together to make sure those people have the best possible experience. That's what we're doing. That's why we're having the engagement with France and the Commission that we're having. That's the best approach, rather than just having global conversations about things that don't really go anywhere.
Daniel Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, I travel on the Channel Tunnel twice a year, and the Channel Tunnel knows that one member of my vehicle is a wheelchair user in case of evacuation. Now, what I would say is the information that comes from them, from the carrier themselves, is very poor. And my concern over the summer months ahead is how that continues. You will have to get out of your vehicle for the first registration check on the first occasion, and for some vulnerable users, that will cause huge disturbance for them on the journey. Now, the pre-registration service is available, but my concern for many people travelling over the summer is how much information is given by them currently to the carrier. So can I ask the Minister, what are the government doing to work with the carriers themselves to provide as much information early on for people so they can help themselves on that journey?
Minister. The honourable gentleman makes an exceptionally important point about vulnerable users. You know, within Operations TAP and Brock, that does give the scope for KMRF to stand up contingency plans that make movement for domestic travel easier, because the last thing we want is for people, particularly vulnerable people, to be in cars for long periods of time. On the point on communications from the carriers, you know, first of all, we work very closely with the carriers, and I think the carriers are working hard, as are the ports. My message to travellers would be, check in with the advice that you're getting from the carriers, particularly on how long to give yourselves. Do not change your travel plans, but do engage to make sure you arrive on time. I, for example, Mr. Speaker, am a sinner on Eurostar for trying to leave it as late as possible. I don't think that that's a very prudent approach at the moment. Instead, check in with your carrier to get that best up-to-date information. But I will undertake to make sure I'm having those conversations to make sure it's as good as possible in the spirit that my honourable friend says.
Dame Karen Bradley, Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee.
The Minister must feel it's slightly deja vu after our exchange at Select Committee yesterday, but can I implore him once again to use every endeavour to use his best office with the EU Commission and with the French to try to get them to understand that we can't wait for there to be delays. We have to have this anticipation of switching off the system. And the Port of Dover and Euroshuttles, the Eurotunnel and others have extraordinarily intelligent and complex ways of forecasting flow. Can they please look at those flows, look at those forecasts and use those for when measures are put in place, not wait for the delays to start?
Again, I think that is an excellent point. I think we demonstrated ahead of the May bank holiday that we were able to, using that kind of, as you say, that rich sense of who's coming, it's not a surprise, to have that planning for when the system, where there needs to be flexibility, particularly for PAF officers. We did that ahead of the May bank holiday. We're doing that again now at this time, and we're having all those conversations to give that flexibility in the service of the goal I think we all want to see, which is the prioritisation of flow.
Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for all that he's doing to sort out this mess. And does he agree that the queues and delays facing British travellers under the EU's entry-exit system were entirely avoidable? Had Britain kept its seat at the table, we wouldn't be subject to these checks at all. And we'd have had a voice in the system's design and rollout over the past 5 years, and we could have made it work better. So instead, just as with steel electric vehicles, we find ourselves on the receiving end of decisions rather than shaping them. Does the Minister agree this is precisely why we need an ambitious new partnership with the EU so Britain can genuinely take back control and British people's European holidays don't start and end in chaos?
I share some of that analysis. I can't say I share all of that analysis, because actually I have to say, if we're dealing in counterfactuals, which I'm usually loath to do, but this one's quite an entertaining one, if we were within these arrangements, a minister, probably myself, would be at this dispatch box being pressed quite rightly by honourable and right honourable colleagues saying, is your system going to work? Is it going to stand up? And the reason I know that is because that conversation is happening in every EU member state. So I think I would encourage colleagues away from the idea that a single counterfactual change in our history would mean that we would have no issues with regards to travel at our ports. I don't think the evidence bears it out. Where I agree with my honourable friend absolutely whole scale is that our relationship with the EU, where our colleagues opposite spent a lot of time thumbing their noses, never in the interest of the British people, to do that with your neighbours, to have that close partnership on data sharing, as I talked with the Select Committee about, and more, to make sure we work as well as possible with our neighbours to ensure flows of travel and secure borders.
Helen Waitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every holiday period, Kent and my constituency of Faversham Mid-Kent is brought to a standstill, and it has become much worse with the introduction of the EU entry-exit system, despite the fact that our port and Eurotunnel has invested in the technology, but that is not working because I understand that the French have not managed to get it to work. I will say that I disagree with the Minister. When Operation Brock is on, that doesn't mean it's all fine. Operation Brock is terrible for my area, although I actually agree with him on the point he just made. This is not to do with Brexit. I hate to break it to the Liberal Democrats and others who've been trying to make this argument. This is nothing to do with Brexit. But this could be horrific. this summer, imagine in this heat, potentially children, elderly people, pets in cars waiting for around 12 hours. This is a disaster. Can I implore the Minister to also involve the Prime Minister and most likely the MP for Makerfield, as this could happen under his watch, to get involved with the negotiation with the EU to, in advance, not wait and see, but in advance, suspend these checks so we can stop these queues happening?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her contribution, and it is important to recognise, as I did in starting, that these queues are not new, but that this risks being a compounding factor. And I too look at the weather and think that I would not want people, I would not want vulnerable people, I would not want pets to be stuck in cars for long periods of time. We absolutely recognise that. I agree too that the operations that I talk about are not a panacea. They do not make queues disappear, but they are about pragmatic ways in challenging circumstances of trying to make it better for people. I think that's a good thing. As I say, I think the Resilience Forum does a very good job in that, and we will work with them alongside to do that. I mean, on the point on engagement, I hope she's heard from me that our view is not at all wait and see. It hasn't been in the past and it isn't now. We want to have that planning ahead of time so that PAF staff can make those flexibilities to prioritise flow.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I do thank the Minister for his answer to the question. And I do have to remind people, of course, that in Scotland the holiday season has already started. So this is an important issue. I mean, the Minister is rightly focusing on the situation with the connection with France, and I understand why that is. But people in Edinburgh South West are concerned about there being real issues in Portugal, Spain, Italy and Greece when it comes to delays at airports. So are we speaking one-to-one with these countries just to make sure, at the very least, we're aware of what the challenges could be? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I mean, I think it's reasonable both for the House but indeed for the government of the day to have a real focus on the juxtaposed ports because they happen on UK soil and have impact in UK constituencies. But it's exactly right. Our constituents will go to all member states. They'll go to all ports in all member states. I'd be willing to venture at some point over the summer period. And I don't want to see them delayed there either and have holidays ruined or have a less enjoyable time. So we are, in exactly the spirit he says, yes, we talk to the Commission, but we talk to member states individually. We have a rich sense individually of not just where every member state is, but where each port is, so that we can very much impose on them the clear view from the British people that they want flow prioritised, and that's what we're doing.
Sir Benn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Could the Minister just point out to the European Union that because we have a common travel area with the Republic of Ireland, and Republic of Ireland are not applying any of these checks on British citizens coming to and from Northern Ireland or direct from the United Kingdom, that there is actually an open border between the European Union and the United Kingdom, and they might as well allow the same access through Dover rather than trying to impose all their rubbish on the United Kingdom. And to say this is all the fault of Brexit, this didn't exist when we left the European Union. This is a result of a decision the dysfunctional European Union is inflicting on British travelling citizens for their own reasons, not for any practical benefits.
So there's a lot in that, Mr Speaker. I would slightly challenge the assertion that the CTA is an open border. It is a border that if an individual crosses it into the UK, they have to have a reason for being there. They have to have real leave and are subject to enforcement activity if they don't. I would not want to see any of our ports when people are connecting into the EU or anywhere else in the world outside of the CTA, an idea that that is an open border. I want to know who's coming and who's going. That's in our nation's interests. And on the final point about there being no practical benefit, it's not for me to make the EU's arguments for them. They can do that for themselves. Nevertheless, it's a really, really good thing, given the conversations we have in this chamber, Mr Speaker, about the flows of persons across the European Union and then to the UK. It's a really good thing that they want to have good borders where they know who's coming and they know who's going, because that plays an important part in making sure we have a safe border too. I think that's a good thing.
Mike Reader.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As an MP representing constituency at the heart of the Golden Triangle, with 1 in 5 of my constituents working in logistics, you can understand this issue comes up regularly, including most recently with Steve Devereux from BSI Transport, who explained to me the costs and red tape that the current entry system creates. Could the Minister set out what assessment his office has taken on the economic impact on HGV drivers and hauliers of the system and what measures they're going to take to support that sector going forward?
Minister. My honourable friend raises an important issue. I mean, I would say on the point on HGVs, there is a degree of ease, not a total degree, but for many, in fact, a majority of HGV drivers, they are European nationals and therefore aren't subject to the same degree of checks, so that flows more easily. Now, that doesn't help if they're in the queue, but it does help ensure they don't cause the queue. On the point of the checks themselves, well, the good thing about the scheme is that once people have done this check, they're not supposed to need to do it again for 3 years. So over time, that will get easier. But we are looking at the economic impacts. That's why, exactly why, both in terms of the impact on the economy and the impact on the ordinary lives of the British people, our clear message is to prioritise flow. And that's why we're having those conversations in that way.
Mike Martin.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Minister for all of his efforts here trying to basically sort out a Tory mess. And, you know, as a fellow Kent MP, I like and greatly respect the member for Herne Hill and Sandwich, Herne Bay and Sandwich. But I do have to ask, is it not a bit cheeky to be asking the government of the day to be sorting out the mess that they voted for? And Minister, will the Minister ask the Conservative Party to respond for creating this problem that he's having to sort out?
I've always taken the view, Mr. Speaker, you know this well, that I get to do the answers, I don't get to do the questions as well. So whatever's put to me, I will seek to address to the best of my ability. I would say the honourable gentleman's right. I do spend a lot of my time clearing up mess of Tory predecessors. I have to say I'm not sure this is one of them. So I wouldn't necessarily say so. But there is plenty of others, including the rampant use of hotels that they allowed, small boats crossings in their entirety, and plenty more.
Chris Vins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answers so far. This is an issue which is hugely important to residents and businesses in my constituency of Harlow, not least because we have an international airport on our doorstep. Mr. Speaker, I am a big believer in cooperation, and I know that in the 60s when we cooperated with our French allies, the result was supersonic. So can I ask the Minister what he's doing to work with our French allies and other European countries? I don't seek to repeat the arguments of the past, but it's hugely important we do cooperate with our European allies to sort this situation out.
Well, my honourable friend holds that most exalted status along with myself of being a Labour and cooperative member of Parliament, so I by instinct am the same as him. I've never found in anything in my life that with a problem with my neighbour, whatever the nature of it, that it got better by shouting rather than cooperating. That's the spirit of our engagement at the moment. I believe that that's the best one going forwards, and that's what we'll continue to do.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Haulage firms, agricultural firms, fisheries firms in my Dumfries and Galloway constituency are heavily reliant on Dover, and delays, particularly to seafood, are disastrous. The value of the cargo disappears practically overnight. As a member of the Business and Trade Committee, we visited Dover, and I was delighted to see £40 million worth of infrastructure on our side of the short street. So the reality here is that the difficulties lie on the far side of the short street. Is it not time that, rather than warm words about an EU reset, we had the French ambassador in for an interview sans café?
Minister.
I mean, the honourable gentleman's testing my GCSE French, but and maybe perhaps I may be found wanting in that regard. I mean, on his first point, we absolutely accept that for some products, time really is absolutely crucial. That's why the ports have put their money where their mouth is, but we have too put the British people's money into that, because it's an importance for his constituency in Dumfries, but also for all of us to make sure that British seafood thrives. That's the right thing to do. With regards to engagement, I don't think that's the most effective way. These are rich conversations that are happening on a daily basis, and it's better that we do that rather than summoning the ambassador or anybody else. I think our approach, both with France and with the Commission, is the better one.
Graham Ledbetter. I don't know who's... Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are clearly significant challenges to work through, and that's not unusual with large-scale technology adoption, as we know. And I welcome the fact that the government's working hard to find these trigger points that where measures will be reduced or where they'll be suspended for periods to try and keep queues to a minimum. But there are two areas I think that the government could do a bit more with. Doing even more to promote the official travel to Europe app that might help with some of the delays. And will the government ensure that perishable goods have prioritised access at ports, which is particularly important for fish exports and other short-life produce that is critical to our economy?
I'm grateful for that. I mean, on the point on short-use freight. As I say, sometimes as a result of the nature of who's driving it, that in itself can make it easier. It is a challenge in terms of prioritisation, because my fear, as I've said to honourable colleagues, is that for vulnerable individuals in cars for long periods of time, there's a very good reason for their prioritisation too, which is flexibility, as I've said, within KMRF's plans. So there is a real challenge about finding that, because many, if not most people, have got a good reason to be moving through at the quickest possible pace. We want everybody's flow to be as good as possible. He makes a really important point on travel information. We need people to avail themselves of that information at early points to plan their travel, particularly the amount of time they need to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It shouldn't come as a surprise that this system was going to be a complete disaster. In the last Parliament, the European Scrutiny Committee, which I sat on at the time, was looking at this very issue and looked at many of the steps that could have been taken. Of course, this government abolished that committee upon taking office, and so that scrutiny has not carried through on preparations to implementation. One of those suggestions was in the transitionary period before the 3-year rules really took effect. We suggested off-site units where people could, under supervision, have their fingerprints taken, which would have cut queues at those juxtaposed ports. Why didn't that happen? Why wasn't that suggestion taken up? And will he put it to the French government that that could be a solution?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for his question. I mean, I might contend, Mr. Speaker, the idea that we don't do very much European scrutiny in this place would be very difficult, because I can't recall ever standing at this dispatch box without talking about the European Union. There's some colleagues who seek to talk about nothing else, it seems. So I do think we have the chance to adequately look at these plans. On the point on off-site infrastructure and similar, I would say to the honourable gentleman, the issue is not with the infrastructure available, because you could have the best infrastructure available for it. If the technology that pulls through to that doesn't work yet, then it's not going to work. My absolute point and my absolute belief, and he will get to challenge this in due course, is that when that tech is operational, the infrastructure is there and in place and in the right parts of the ports. But that we need the tech to work first before we'll be able to properly test that.
Paul Cullen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Minister, despite the unholy alliance between him and the Tory front bench, this is clearly a product of Brexit. I visited Dover with the Home Affairs Committee last week. They've invested over £40 million in the infrastructure, but the software is not working. There will be chaos unless the ESS is suspended this summer. Yes, this is a Brexit dividend, but can the Minister emphasise to the French, rather than enjoying the schadenfreude, that how much their economy will be damaged by the chaos that's going to ensue?
I mean, I'm grateful for that point. On the point on alliances, I've always taken the view in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, that if I agree with somebody, I say I agree with them. If I disagree with them, I say I disagree with them. And it doesn't really matter which party or what part of the UK they come from. I think that's in all of our constituents' interests. On the Brexit point, he's heard my answer to that. I mean, but what I would say, whatever the well-meant and different positions we may hold, if we went, one thing I know for certain, if we went tapping on people's windows if they are in queues and said, by the way, you know this is about Brexit, I don't think that they would consider that a suitable or sufficient answer from their leaders. On the point on the French, I don't recognise the Schadenfreude point, because I haven't heard that in this debate. And it's certainly not the view of the government. We see these things always with our neighbours as shared challenges. We have what we think is a very important way forward, and those are the conversations we're having with our neighbours.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I firstly echo the previous point which was made about the Scottish holidays having already begun and the need to focus in on the holiday hotspots, if I can use that expression, such as the Spanish islands, the Greek islands, in order to ensure travel is made easier as possible for Scottish travellers. But can I also raise the issue of coach travel? Many people travel by coach. So what assessment has the Home Office made of the impact, not just on the passengers, but on coach drivers of the EES?
I'm grateful for those questions. I mean, the point on Scottish holidays has been well made by colleagues. I think the point I'm making here is around we can model volumes relatively accurately because we know who is and isn't on holiday and indeed who has booked and hasn't booked holidays. So that's the point around volumes. But we have prepared throughout for different spikes, particularly around different events. I was worried it seems forlornly that Manchester City fans wouldn't be able to get to the Champions League final. It turns out we did not challenge that issue particularly, I'm sad to say. On the point on coaches, this is very important, both in terms of the passengers, but as he says, the drivers, because that is a heavily regulated profession. That means there are hard and fast rules about what those individuals can and can't do. Those coaches and those coach companies are well placed in this regard. They do this routinely. It's their business. So them having that preparation, that planning, those are the conversations we're having with all sorts of transport carriers.
Carla Lockhart.
Mr Speaker, yesterday in a Northern Ireland Affairs session it was revealed by Mr Eddie Montgomery, a senior Home Office official to the Right Honourable Member for East Belfast, that the focus of this government is purely on the ports. So we have a senior official confirming that this government is concerned only about the ports and who is coming into GB and not Northern Ireland. Does he agree with this sentiment, given all that has happened within Northern Ireland with regards to illegal immigration?
The Honourable Lady may or may not have had the chance to see from the transcript or indeed the film that I was in the subsequent panel on that discussion. That isn't the view of the UK government. The point being made here was with regards to the enforcement of the common travel area, we do significant levels of immigration enforcement. We've done over 2,600 visits since the general election. More than 1,000 people have been removed from the UK as a result of them, 500 of them back to the Republic of Ireland. We take them very seriously. There is, of course, for very good reason, we focus on all of our ports as a point of challenge, but that enforcement activity happens across Northern Ireland, not just at the ports. We take an intelligence-led approach to Northern Ireland, and we always will do, because we do not want to see the CTA abused.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, further to the excellent point made by my honourable friend, the member for Dumfries and Galloway, the Minister will no doubt be aware that Bridlington is the lobster capital of Europe, and therefore any delays at Dover have a very serious impact on our vital export market. But I want to address the wider issue of tourists this summer, and whether the Minister agrees that other countries like France, like Spain and like Portugal should follow the lead of Greece and delay the implementation of the EES system until such time it is fit for purpose.
Well, first of all, I would commend Bridlington's lobster industry. I have to say that was a new one to me, but I'm going to correct that error at the first possible opportunity. That is, of course, the ultimate lifetime product, I would suggest, in seafood. I'm stretching my seafood knowledge to some degree, and we're therefore very aware of the impact on Bridlington's seafood industry. On the point on member states using their flexibilities, I do share that. I want to see, and these are the nature of the conversations we're having, yes, with France, but with the Commission and across EU member states, that they use flexibilities to prioritise flow, and I think that's the right thing to do, and I think all colleagues would agree there.
Pete Wishaw.
Mr Speaker, it's the 10-year anniversary of leaving Brexit, but you barely know anything. There's been absolutely no celebrations whatsoever, no carrying the honourable member for Clapdown shoulder high down the Mall. There's been no celebrations about how we spent all that extra £350 million per week. But here we have it. The Brexit birthday present after 10 years, a miserable start to people's holidays and our business being disrupted. Scotland didn't vote for the Brexit. Scotland wanted nothing whatsoever to do with the Brexit. So why are Scottish holidaymakers getting caught up in this? And what is he doing in order to try and alleviate some of these situations?
Well, the honourable gentleman's heard what we're doing. We're engaging with our partners across member states and the Commission to make sure that they prioritise flow over compliance. That's the right thing to do. He raises very important points about Brexit. These come up frequently in our discussions. He will have heard me say, may well have heard me say, there is, for example, challenges that I deal with on a daily basis, such as access to data and information, that we are seeking to add back as part of the UK-EU Summit, that we doubtlessly are missing, and is an impact of the decision that the British people took there. I'm just not sure that this fits into that, because we'd be having this conversation in some form anyway, either way.
Dr Alping.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's clear that the UK-EU Reset Summit that was initially scheduled for July and now delayed to October, that cancellation has not cancelled the problems that summit was, at least in part, designed to address. So I wonder whether the Minister might in fact suggest an interim emergency summit to deal explicitly with this issue, to bring together the French and the European Commission to try and resolve this issue before we hit peak summer season. And if he is willing to organise that summit, could he also raise the case of UK hauliers who are reporting inconsistent scanning of exit from the Schengen area and real fears that their 90 and 180-day entitlement is going to be artificially run down because of that inconsistent scanning, because that's going to have a profound effect on our economy.
Well, the honourable gentleman provides me perhaps with greater power than I have with regards to convening international summits. I would say, this is something that's taking place outside of that process anyway. These conversations are happening every day, but I also know that my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, next week is with European counterparts, and EES is on the agenda for that. So that work is going on. With regards to the inconsistent scanning, I'm concerned to hear that. I know that that has a profound impact on the business or on workers. If there are examples, I would be very keen to look at it to make sure that people aren't being affected in ways they shouldn't be.
That completes it with Jim Shannon.
First of all, can I thank the Minister very much, always for his positivity in his answers. He usually, and always has fairly successfully tries to calm us when it comes to these questions. Whilst the Home Office scrambles to put kiosks into English ports, what specific targeted measures is the Minister putting in place at our own Northern Ireland seaports, such as Belfast and Larne, and at our airports, to stop them? To stop this EES loophole from turning Northern Ireland into a magnet for illegal, on-track transit into the rest of the United Kingdom? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, it's important to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that of course at those ports there will not be EES checks. The only EES checks taking place on UK soil are at the juxtaposed ports that I've talked about. Nevertheless, I am very, very interested in the travel arrangements and the good holiday arrangements for people of Newton Ards and the rest of Strangford, and that's really important that when they get to their destination they're able to flow through, and when they come home they're able to flow through. That's why we're having those conversations with all member states along that basis. And then similarly, he will have heard the changes and flexibilities we're doing around our domestic e-gates to make sure that when his residents get home they can get through their ports more quickly.
Can I thank the Minister for his responses this afternoon? I will allow a couple of moments for the front benches to swap over. Which brings us to an urgent question on the management of the Maritime Coastguard Agency and proposed changes to payments made to Coastguard Rescue Officers. Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I, through you, thank Mr Speaker for allowing me the opportunity to ask this urgent question today of the Secretary of State for Transport, if she will make a statement on the management of the Maritime Coastguard Agency and proposed changes to payments made to Coastguard Rescue Officers.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I begin by thanking the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland for bringing forward this urgent question on what is an incredibly important matter. I welcome the opportunity to set out the Government's position on the remuneration of Coastguard Rescue Officers, and I want to begin by recognising the extraordinary contribution made by CROs across the United Kingdom. For generations, His Majesty's Coastguard's coastal response has depended on people from local communities who choose to serve, often alongside full-time employment and family life. The reason we are here today is because the model had to change. For years, when people signed up as volunteers, they had their expenses covered and an offer of hourly pay, which they did not need to claim, in recognition of the incredible service that they undertook and the impact that it had upon their personal life. The Court of Appeal judgment clarified that this payment overwhelmingly shifted what many considered to be a volunteer relationship into a work-wage bargain, and that this in turn conferred worker status. Everything we have done since then has been to respect that judgment, to understand what we do next, and to allow CROs to continue fulfilling their vital public service and retain operational capacity. There is no perfect solution to this, but ultimately the volunteer model was judged at the time to be the better outcome for the service. This was the judgment that was reached by the MCA, who, as experts in search and rescue, took into account a variety of factors, including profiles of incident types, geographies, organisational implications, as well as a survey of CRO sentiment and legal analysis, with which they made a recommendation. This recommendation allowed CROs to retain volunteer status with the aim of protecting flexibility and the ability for people to serve alongside their primary employment. Careful consideration was given to options, including legal position, the operational implications and the wider organisational impact. Now, I have heard the concerns of the CRO community about this change, and that is why the next stage of the process, the engagement sessions that were due to take place this week, have been postponed, while I carry on working with them, trade unions and colleagues across the House. I will reflect on what has been raised in these discussions and consider in the long term how our Coast Guard volunteers can be recognised. Volunteering has been at the heart of His Majesty's Coast Guard response for over 200 years. It enables individuals to serve their communities alongside their primary employment, maintaining choice and flexibility. I remain grateful to all members of the CRS for their unwavering commitment to their communities and people in distress around the UK coastline.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that answer. As the Minister knows, last week we had more than 30 members in Westminster Hall for a debate on these changes. I'm pleased to hear that it was a result of his intervention that the check-in meetings were postponed and that the matters are now under full consideration. Is the Department actually considering the possibility of legislative change to deal with this problem? Madam Deputy Speaker, the House goes into recess at the end of next week, so can the Minister give the House an undertaking that these check-in meetings and this process of change will not be resumed during the recess and without a statement first being made to this House? Since last week's debate, I have been contacted by a number of full-time officers who have described to me a toxic management culture within the agency. I have been told of at least 3 whistleblowing complaints that have been made to the Department in March. Despite the passage of time, the whistleblowers themselves remain unclear about the progress of their complaints. Can the Minister give me some reassurance that these whistleblowing complaints will be properly and speedily investigated, and that a proper and independent investigation will now be initiated into the management culture within the Maritime Coastguard Agency? Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, information obtained under a Freedom of Information Act release indicates that responses to the MCA's own survey show that almost 40% of CROs would reduce the number of call-outs to which they would respond or leave the service completely. This contradicts what members of this House were told by the MCA. Can the Minister please explain why this information was not disclosed voluntarily by the agency, and will he now give the full disclosure of the outcome of that survey?
Minister.
May I begin by thanking the Right Honourable Member for his championing of CROs, but doing so in such a fair-minded, open and constructive way to respond substantively to some of the points that he has made. In terms of parliamentary scrutiny of prospective changes or working through options in relation to the future of CROs, let me make a commitment to him that members of Parliament will be updated fully on any changes, that I can commit to informing the House on what the next steps will be. And he raised a very important point during the Westminster Hall debate on this issue, that MPs need to be allowed to be able to access CROs and have meaningful conversations with them about what they think the future of the service should look like. He asks me about subsequent data and whether that was used to inform the judgment that was made. Can I just confirm to him that survey data was one constituent part of a package of advice that was put in regard to an operational recommendation made by experts at the MCA about what future models should be comprised of. That is alongside impact assessments and modelling. If he has, and he raised this as part of his Westminster Hall debate contribution, subsequent about how CROs believe this will impact them and about the reality for his rural constituency and the island communities that he represents so fulsomely, I would strongly encourage him to share it with me. But may I just reiterate the fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I want members of Parliament to be able to play their full role in representing CROs throughout this process.
Will Crichton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I declare my chairmanship of the Voluntary Rescue Services APPG? And in that role, along with the honourable friend for Scarborough and Whitby, who chairs the Coastal Communities APBG, I would like to inform the House that we are holding a joint evidence session for CROs next week, so that they can come and tell their stories to parliamentarians. And when I spoke to my CROs in Stornoway and across the Western Isles, their message was one that's been received by the Minister, I hope, is to pause this consultation, to go back, listen to CROs, to the vital role they play as a fourth blue light service, not just in coastal rescue, but in delivering carers and emergency workers to the elderly in time of need. And can I also get assurance that he will come back to us before before Parliament goes into recess to fully inform us and to keep CROs fully informed of the process.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his contribution. I've already made a commitment to the right honourable gentleman opposite to keep the House fully informed about any next steps which are taken. But the honourable gentleman raises a broader point about how CROs have engaged throughout this process, and there are some fundamental truths which I keep coming back to. One is that remuneration takes place not because it allows CROs to carry out the work that they do. They don't do it for the money, but they do it because it allows them to carry out this vital public service. There is another aspect that needs to be picked up on too, which is it's not always possible to reflect the scale of the contribution of what CROs make. I was in Southampton the other day and spoke to around 15 CROs. They were saying you can't pick up of when you take the van to be MOT'd or when you have to douse down the equipment after you've rescued somebody from mud. Ultimately, this is about fairness, it's about recognition, and that's what I want to do my level best to inject into this process.
Shadow Minister Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland for securing this urgent question, and to Mr Speaker for granting it. There is deep concern across the whole country on the decision of the government, particularly affecting our coastal communities, demonstrated clearly in the Westminster Hall debate from all sides last week, where the Minister said he would reflect on what he's heard, and he's repeated that this morning, but from the answers he's given so far, I suggest he reflects a little bit harder and more urgently. I'd particularly like to pay tribute to my honourable friend for the Isle of Wight East for his tireless work in highlighting these issues. The problem is not speculative. The data revealed by the Times from the MCA survey is absolutely clear. This change will decimate the Coast Guard. The survey showed across all regions between 25% and 58% of those who responded said a volunteer model would lead them to quit or reduce their hours, including 56% in the South East and Southern England regions, which covers the busiest stretches of coastline in the UK. A decrease in the number of Coast Guard officers at this scale would put people's lives at risk. It is that simple. However, despite knowing that this was coming for months, there appears to have been a complete failure from the department in appreciating and anticipating the impact of the decision. Why is that? Why was the impression given that even though it was a tough decision, the Coast Guard would be able to carry on as normal and that there was sufficient support for the changes? Can the Minister explain who within the department and the MCA knew about the revelations in the Times this week and how this was allowed to be shared by the MCA to members of this House in what can only be described as a questionable manner? The data is the data, not part of some sort of package. The first responsibility of government is to protect the public. But in this matter, I fear it has failed. As we look ahead and approach the height of summer, protecting our waterways is critical. So can the Minister answer a simple question? What is he going to do urgently and immediately to solve the problem?
I thank the Shadow Minister for his contribution. In regards to what I'm doing personally to solve the problem, the reason that those consultation sessions are not going ahead this week is because I'm honouring the commitment that I made to the House last week in the Westminster Hall debate to respond to the concerns that have been raised by members of Parliament on a number of issues about the operational implications of the decision that was taken, about very serious concerns raised by the Right Honourable Member for Shetland and Orkney, as well as questions around parliamentary engagement with CROs and allegations being made that MPs were not granted proper access to be able to engage with CROs prior to this decision being taken. Those are all things of serious concern to me. They are the reason that this pause has gone ahead. I would question what he said in regard to the data standing alone in terms of the operational judgment that was made. I would reiterate the fact that a package of measures is put to enable us to make a decision based on impact assessments, based on operational evidence, and based on the surveys that he references. But the surveys only form a constituent part of how that process works. But the salient point remains that it is right to reflect on the concerns that have been raised across this House, to consider long-term options about what can be done to ensure that CROs feel valued and that operational capacity is not just retained, but is retained in every part of the United Kingdom, including in our rural areas. And that is what I'm committed to do.
Alison Hume.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I declare my interest as co-chair of the APPG for Coastal Communities? I recently met with Coastguard Rescue Officers from Ravenscar who are seriously concerned about the future of the service. These CROs bring decades-long experience and routinely respond to complex call-outs, including, sadly, involving suicide in my constituency of Scarborough-Whitby. As my honourable friend has mentioned, we are holding an evidence session next week in Parliament. And can I invite the Minister to attend and hear firsthand from the CROs about their fears for the future?
Can I thank my honourable friend for her doggedly determined support for her CRO? She is absolutely right to do so. I'd be pleased to engage with the evidence sessions that are taking place next week, and I look forward to seeing the findings for them. She is right to point to the fact that CROs have decades of experience. I spoke to a CRO in Southampton just the other day who had served through the MCA for the best part of 50 years, and we cannot afford for that experience to slip through the cracks. She also mentions what CROs have to respond to, often the most tragic of circumstances for people who, unfortunately, it has not been possible to save. Remuneration does not obfuscate from that fact or make it better, but it is a way of recognising the enormous contribution that CROs make. And I think that point around fairness and about due regard for the contribution that they make has to run to the centre of what comes next.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ben Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I sincerely thank my right honourable friend, the member for Orkney and Shetland, for bringing this urgent question. These highly skilled, experienced Coast Guard volunteers are being badly let down by this government, and I cannot imagine other rescue service personnel being treated the same way. No one could argue that £11 an hour is enriching these volunteers, merely enabling them to do this vital work. And as one Coast Guard volunteer from my North Cornwall constituency put it, I make significant personal and financial sacrifices to be available for emergency call-outs. I didn't join the service to get paid. So sadly, we didn't need to get to this point. Did the Minister even speak to any of the rescue officers to hear how these changes would impact them before this rush decision was made? Would the Minister commit to a full risk assessment on these damaging changes? And finally, will the Minister confirm the government is considering viable alternatives, like a statutory stipend system, passing legislation to exempt Coast Guard workers from this worker status, or even just embracing the worker status of the CROs?
May I thank the Lib Dem spokesperson for his contribution. He is absolutely right to say that CROs do not do it for the money, but it is the money that makes it possible. He also speaks to the fact that £11 an hour doesn't constitute remuneration in the way that it would, that we would all hope that CROs could be respected. What it does do is go some small way towards the Christmas dinners, the birthdays missed, the call-outs in the middle of the night, the disruption to family life. And that is a part of the CRO experience which I think needs to flow into our decision-making in this space, and was certainly reflected to me when I spoke to the 15 CROs that I did in Southampton the other day and learned about the lived experience of how they are processing these changes. He asks me about risk, about mitigating risk, and about operational certainty. I can confirm to him that operational impacts were carefully considered in the advice that was put to me. That modelling has been done, and it's informed as part of a package of data alongside the survey information, which allows the MCA, who are the experts who are there to advise on what the operational impacts would be, of what the reality of the situation is.
Anna Geldert.
As Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Minister for his continued engagement with me and with other members, but given this unique nature of the Coast Guard Rescue Officer role and the extraordinary commitment that they show, including my own area of South East Cornwall, to respond at all hours, will ensure that the Department undertakes a comprehensive assessment of all viable options so that the Government can reach a fully informed decision that is right for both Coast Guard Rescue Officers and the communities like mine that they serve with such dedication.
Minister.
My honourable friend gives me an opportunity to reiterate the fact that CROs and their lived experience and their views on these changes must run to the heart of what happens next. That is why the meetings that were scheduled to take place this week are not taking place this week, because I want to take the time to reflect on what honourable members have told me, and also what CROs have had the opportunity to tell me about how these changes will affect them. That is nowhere more important than in the rural community like the one that my honourable friend represents. And just to build on that point, as the MP, she should be able to engage with her CROs on this matter where it is most convenient, including if that is at the station itself, so that she can represent them. And that is as well as making sure that trade union representation is also factored in to ongoing engagement with CROs, so that we can make sure that we get the details right.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. the boss of the Maritime Coastguard Agency told MPs in person that 93% of CROs surveyed were happy with moving to an unpaid volunteer model. That was false. The survey data shows that in many areas across the UK, nearly half would reduce their hours or quit. I'm amazed he has any confidence in the boss of the MCA. Will he now confirm that decision will not take effect in September, that he will consult properly himself, and does he have confidence in the boss of the MCA?
I thank the honourable member for his question. We need to ensure that the CROs who are affected by these changes have the opportunity to carry on raising the concerns that they have, but also to raise instances where, and he has quite fulsomely argued that the worker model is an appropriate way to continue. That could be true in a great number of cases. It is not true in every case. And I spoke to a CRO in Southampton for whom that is not the case. We need to tease out the detail of all of these things. We need to listen carefully to CROs, and we need to create the space to allow that to happen. I'm not going to say specifically what the options are that I may or may not take in the coming days, but what I'm doing by pausing the sessions that are meant to happen this week is creating the space to be able to weigh up those options dispassionately and make sure that we can get them right so that CROs can continue to share their views and we can take decisions which reflect the incredible contribution that they make.
Justin Matters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I refer to my register of interest and membership of the G&B trade union. I'm sorry to say that it beggars belief that the response of a Labour government to a court judgment confirming workers' rights is to run in the opposite direction in some perverse form of fire and rehire. I hope that the Minister can be clear that that is not what we stand for and that he will do his utmost to address that situation. But there is a wider point here, isn't there, that too often we see ambiguities in employment status dealt with by the courts on an ad hoc basis. Isn't that a reason for us to get on with our manifesto commitment to move to a single status of worker?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend has a lot of experience in this House on making sure that workers and their rights are protected. The characterisation of the situation which he made at the beginning of his remarks is one that I could not reject more strongly. Changes to the Coastguard Rescue Service operating model are a result of a legal judgment which meant that the current model could not legally continue. What we are attempting to do is maintain a system whereby CROs feel valued at their work, feel motivated to turn up and to carry out their shifts, and that the fairness that is inherent to that is respected and carried out. That is exactly why I've postponed those meetings this week. That is why I'm creating the space to hear directly from them about their concerns and to get the detail of this right.
Ian Room.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The MCA have told MPs that they have data to back their claim that CROs would rather be volunteers than employees. Can the Minister confirm if these findings can be shared? Because this has a massive bearing on the MCA's decision and may greatly undermine the essential lifeline Coastguard Rescue Officers provide to coastal communities like mine in North Devon.
I understand that for the honourable gentleman, it is not an option to have a Coast Guard service that works effectively. It is an absolute necessity to protect people in his coastal community. What I can say to him is that we are going to continue to engage with CROs. One of his colleagues in the Westminster Hall debate asked me what information could be shared. I made a commitment that I would go back to my officials and ask that question, and that is something that I'm currently working through. But what I have derived from this process and my enduring objective throughout this process is to make sure that CROs feel heard and are able to share their concerns, including through their MPs, as the honourable gentleman has rightly done.
Helena Dollymore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I refer the House to my register of interests in terms of the GMB, and I also declare that I'm a supporter of the RNLI. I want to thank my honourable friend for bringing this urgent question and pay tribute to the life-saving work that our local Coast Guard officers do, as well as the brilliant volunteer RNLI officers and the independent lifeboats that we have, like at PET in my own constituency. But I want to also thank the Minister for stepping in here and pausing this process. I think it's vital, as he says, that we fully review this process. We reflect on the MCA's handling of this issue, which I think has been pretty shocking in the experience of my Coast Guard officers, and it's absolutely vital that we pause and take enough time to get this right for our coastal communities, particularly because with more extreme weather events climate change. We're seeing a heat wave right now. We know there'll be more storms. There might even be more sharks coming to our waters. The work of the Coast Guard officers is more important than ever before.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising those points and use it to reflect on something that's been raised by a number of members, and that is about how engagement takes place going forward. Can I just make it absolutely clear that my expectation is that all engagement with CROs, whether that be by the MCA or MPs meeting with them, is done as openly and transparently as possible. I want Coast Guard rescue officers to feel able to share their views openly in all of their complexity, and some of the allegations that the Right Honourable Gentleman for Orkney and Shetland made last week about CROs being made to feel uncomfortable about sharing their views, I find deeply, deeply concerning. I want to reiterate that I will be making it clear to leadership in the MCA that that is how I want them to approach this engagement, and that includes ensuring that MPs and trade unions play their full role, and I hope that my honourable friend can do so.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This House has the capacity to criticise, but it also has the capacity to be fair. I think the Minister probably finds himself between a rock and a cliff face in a situation that he didn't make himself. That doesn't absolve the MCA from the right criticism that's been levelled earlier today. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one of those peculiar constituencies that has both a north coast and a south coast. Both of those coastlines are served by dedicated volunteers who go out in all weathers to save lives. I've heard from some of them. It is quite clear that unless this is resolved swiftly, those people will be lost. And if they're lost, they won't come back. So could I say that as far as I'm concerned, and I can't speak obviously for other people on these benches, I will back whatever measure the Minister seeks to take in order to make sure that there is a timely resolution to this issue so we don't lose good people.
Yeah. May I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his remarks. I share his view that we cannot afford to lose the level of experience that we have within the MCA and the CRO community. I also heard the scale of concern which he so ably references and has experienced among his own Coast Guard volunteers. I think critical to that is recognising two things. One is all of the work that CROs undertake, which lies outside of the call-outs that they receive. They do an enormous amount of work, which isn't fully recognised and needs to be. And in terms of treating them with due respect and esteem, it is essential that we figure out a way forward that allows us to do so. And the Honourable Gentleman has picked up the necessity to do that very well indeed. And it's certainly my intention that that will inform whatever comes next in this process.
Before I call the next questioner, can I just make it clear that I will go to Steve Darling immediately after that one. Fred Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm very grateful to hear the Minister has engaged with Coast Guard Rescue Officers in Southampton, and that's typical of his diligent manner and approach to difficult issues like this. I would like to invite him to interact with my constituents in Plymouth, part of the Plymouth Coast Guard Rescue team, who tell me harrowing stories of supporting the ambulance service, the police, sadly too often with suicide-related issues. An unbelievable service, and yes, they deserve remuneration. They deserve a lot more recognition than that. And will the Minister agree to speak with those constituents of mine?
Minister.
I'd be very glad to speak with my honourable friend's constituents, and he raises an incredibly important point that very often CROs are not only discharging the responsibilities that we would expect of a Coast Guard rescue officer, they are increasingly filling in the gaps for other emergency blue light services who, for whatever reason, are not able to get to people in time or are thinly stretched and require CROs to step up. That requires them to go beyond the operational requirements that we would expect of them. So this process is not just about recognising the incredible service that they contribute within the envelope of what is expected of them. They go beyond that every single day. My honourable friend raises that very well, and it's something that I would be happy to engage with his constituents on further.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my discussions with the Coast Guards in Torbay, they've shared the full spectrum of their activities. One of the most disturbing and harrowing of this is the recovery of dead bodies. Not only dead bodies of humans, but from pets that may have gone over the edge of a cliff, but humans where there's been a drowning or a cliff fall, and this may be accident or suicide, and this will leave emotional scars on these officers. Would the Minister agree with me that choosing not to financially compensate people who are undertaking work that many of us would find really difficult is short of an insult?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman speaks powerfully about the contributions that CROs make in the most tragic and emotionally traumatic of circumstances. That is exactly why we need to do a number of things. We need to build a system that allows us to retain operational capacity so that we can keep people in our waters safe, and also grant the CROs and the MCA more broadly the resilience to be able to carry out their meaningful work. It also means that we need to treat CROs with the fairness, the dignity and the respect that they require. He is right to say that remuneration allowed us to do that. We are now dealing with the consequences of the Court of Appeal judgment to process how we move forward to make sure that fairness and due respect is continued into the future. And I hope that he can continue to hold me account as we do so.
Alan Gemmell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his statement and engagement on this issue? Coastguard Rescue Officers are an essential part of our emergency response and much supported by people in Ayrshire, and I'd like to put on record my thanks for their dedicated service. My honourable friend, the member for North Ayrshire and Arran, and I are very worried that Coastguard services in North Ayrshire are facing a crisis if not able to claim this compensation. I'm very pleased the Minister has postponed further meetings and is working with unions, but might he do all he can to resolve this issue so our Coastguard Rescue Officers can continue to perform their essential service?
May I thank my honourable friend for his contribution, and he also speaks powerfully about for rural and island communities in Scotland and the impact that it can have. Something I am cognizant of from hearing it from CROs in Southampton, and I'm deeply concerned about the implications of, is the principle of demotivation. A CRO said to me that this is ultimately about fairness. The money isn't anything to brag about, but it's fair recognition for what we do. I don't want any CRO to feel devalued or feel less motivated to turn up to a call out because of decisions that have been made. That's why it is so important that in regard to the engagement that is happening next week, we take a beat, take some time to reflect on what CROs are saying and try and find an equitable solution. And I'm sure that my honourable friend will be part of that process as we do so.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I just help him answer the question he was asked by my right honourable friend on the front bench for the opposition? The answer is the law is an ass and the law should be changed, as said the original questioner for this urgent question. I mean, how can it be the law is interfering in a perfectly happy relationship between Coastguard volunteers and the MCA? The law is an ass, and that is quite clearly the view of the Coastguards I met in my constituency in West Mersey last week.
The honourable gentleman is a far more seasoned member of this House than I am, and therefore I'll leave it to him to opine on whether the word the law is an ass is parliamentary language or not. That being said, it's incumbent upon the department to deal with the legal reality that has been created as a consequence of this judgment. It is also right to say that the volunteer model that exists for CROs with hourly remuneration is rather unique in regard to how volunteering works and therefore requires a bespoke response. I can assure him that I'm weighing up options for the long-term future of CROs to ensure that that recognition can take place. There is a potential primary legislative route that I want to explore around a carve-out. It would take a lot of time to do. It is very legally complex and it has other implications that go beyond the Maritime and Coastguard Agency. So I very much respect and thank the honourable gentleman for his urgency, but I have to take these decisions this passionately and with full cognizance of their implications.
Dame Nia Griffith.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, my dedicated volunteer Coastguard Rescue Officers are absolutely vital to the safety of the public along the very long coastline all around my constituency. But can the Minister tell us what response he expects the Maritime and Coastguard Agency to give to the formal written request by the GMB Union for collective bargaining purposes and voluntary recognition? Minister.
Let me thank my honourable friend for that contribution. I've already been very clear from this dispatch box that I not just want but expect the Maritime and Coastguard Agency to allow trade unions to play their full role when it comes to working with CROs to articulate their vision about what they want the future of the service to be. I do not feel it would be appropriate for me to comment on negotiations between a trade union and their employer in the way that she expects me to, but I'm very clear in my expectation that trade unions must be allowed to play their full role in this process.
Christine Jardine.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my right honourable friend from Orkney and Shetland for bringing this urgent question forward. My constituents in Edinburgh West around South Queensferry, where we have a lifeboat, have written to me in great numbers concerned about the service. The service in South Queensferry is not like many of the others that have been mentioned. It's not rural, it's not Highland, it is largely suburban, and it patrols an area under 3 very large bridges, and there are a lot of tragic incidents that they have to deal with. The Coast Guard there have told me that they are concerned about what might happen as a result of these steps. So when the Minister is speaking to people, would he come to my constituency and hear what they've got to say and hear what the community have got to say as we hit peak tourist season?
Minister.
I'm very happy to engage with the Honourable Lady's constituents on this matter, and I thank her for so robustly defending them in this House. She is right to say that we've spoken a lot about the importance of CROs to rural and island communities and about coastal communities. She brings an incredibly important perspective about the implications of this for cities, especially as we look toward the summer period and to peak tourist season. She is right to point to the fact that that will build as an issue over the summer. These changes, of course, when they originally announced, were due to be implemented in September. That is not to say that I'm not cognizant of the fact that there could be implications in terms of people feeling demotivated about their willingness to come to a call out before then. That's why it's really important that we take the time to re-engage with CROs, such as the one in her constituency, to talk about what the long-term options are.
Lorraine Beavers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Fleetwood and Lytham Coast Guard have been officially recognised as the two busiest in the UK. I want to place on record my thanks for their amazing dedication to keeping our people safe. Will the Minister reassure the House that the GMB Union and volunteer Coast Guards will be fully consulted at all stages, and that communities like mine in Blackpool North and Fleetwood are not going to be put at risk?
The safety of the public and the operational capacity of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency are of the utmost importance to the government, and CROs feeling like they are respected and able to play their full part in that process is what facilitates that, and that is what I am so determined to try to achieve. The Honourable Lady is right to push me on the question of trade union involvement in that process. My expectation is that trade unions should play their full role in representing their members.
Alison Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, I met Paul Greenwood of Selsey Coast Guard, part of a team of CROs which covers my Bognor Regis and Littlehampton constituency. The court ruled that Coast Guards can be workers when paid for duties. It did not order ministers to scrap payments. So can the Minister tell me what lawful alternatives were considered? Why the impact assessment has still not been published? Will he publish the MCA's survey? And will he pause September's change whilst considering an approach that will not risk gaps in emergency cover when coastal communities like mine dial 999?
May I thank the Honourable Lady for her contribution. I've been very clear from this dispatch box that I'm tasking with my officials with discerning which information can be released in relation to the questions that she raises. It's critically important that MPs are able to engage fully in this process and hold me to account as they do so. Like I said previously at the start of this statement, ultimately, we had to comply with the judgment that was passed down by the Court of Appeal. That mandated the need to change the current operating system with which, if we carried on implementing, we were not being compliant with the law. The question now is what comes next and what the long-term options are, and that is something that I'm committed to exploring with members across the House.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I draw the House's attention to my register of interest as a GMB member. I recently met Coast Guard Rescue Officers in my own office, and they told me how they respond in all conditions, they respond at all hours, they drop everything to save life, and they're often out of pocket to provide that public service. So can I ask the Minister to consider all options, including carving out an exemption when it comes to HMRC, and can I also take this opportunity to encourage all CROs to join the GMB Union so that they can care for their needs, particularly given the recent concerning allegations in a national newspaper about the MCA, who I believe are not being straight with the government. And can I close by asking the Minister to thank the Coast Guard Rescue Officers in Bournemouth East for all that they're doing to save life.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. Coast Guard Rescue Officers in Bournemouth East carry out an incredible service on behalf of their local community and their country to keep the public safe, and we thank them deeply for their service. I can confirm to him that we are looking at a range of options around what comes next. He must play his part in that process as we do so alongside trade unions. But what I would just reiterate is that I want CROs to be able to feel like they can fully and frankly contribute their views about what the implications of this decision are, especially now that more time has elapsed, which allows them to properly consider the full range of how this might impact alongside primary employment and other considerations. I would encourage him to share that with me, and let's all collaborate in this process to make sure that CROs' voices are heard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my own constituency, we have Coastguard Rescue Services operating in Nairn, Birkhead and also at Gordonston School. One constituent who works for the local team said, after September, the cost will fall entirely on myself or my small business employer. This is not right. And they went on to say that the changes will force me to no longer be available for call-outs during working hours. They also went on to say that they don't do the role for financial gain, that a small amount of remuneration enables those of us who are employed to respond to emergency call-outs without suffering financial loss during a cost of living crisis. Will the Minister give an assurance on 2 points, that the changes will not be made until we are collectively satisfied that these volunteers have been treated fairly, and that what is an emergency service that is life or death will not be diminished as a consequence of them?
Hear, hear.
The situation that the Honourable Gentleman describes from a CRO in his constituency is exactly what I want to avoid. He's also right to point out that a number of CROs who I spoke to the other day are small business owners, and we appreciate how hard they need to work, often with small margins, to keep their businesses running. And it takes us back to that point that remuneration is not something to brag about in terms of the level that it is, but it does allow CROs to do their job, and it's incredibly important that we are cognizant of that. In terms of having the opportunity for all of us to play our role in engaging with what comes next, that is something that I am very, very keen to facilitate, and it goes back to the point that I made to the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland about making sure that MPs are kept up to date on what all of the latest steps are in this process, and that they can play their full role in holding me to account so that we get this right for CROs.
Alan Mack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hayling Island Coastguard Rescue Team provides a vital service in the Havant constituency on the south coast. They fear that the MCA's proposal will have a massively detrimental effect on local recruitment and retention, particularly from the island. How will the Minister ensure that CROs are properly consulted, and will he come to Hayling Island to meet the CROs who do fantastic work?
Minister.
May I thank the Honourable Gentleman for being such a champion of the CROs in his constituency, and I'm very happy to engage with them if he would be willing to facilitate this. Making sure that CROs are able to share their views fully and frankly is incredibly important to me. The way that I am attempting to facilitate it is by making it very clear that my expectation for the MCA leadership is that they give CROs the space to engage fully with me and with their local members of parliament, with their trade unions and with their local leadership, so that we can get a clear picture of what their view is on how these changes might impact their operational ability, so that we can all work together to find an equitable solution to this challenge.
Caroline Bowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have 4 Coastguard stations in South Devon: Kingsbridge, Dartmouth, Brixham and Bigbury, and hundreds of volunteers, many of whom have written to me with concern over these changes. Kingsbridge have been out 34 times this year. Last Friday night they were called out at 1 a.m. They spent all night rescuing 3 people from a vessel that had got stuck in the mud. These people wake up in the middle of the night to go out to rescue strangers who they've never met. Now, the Minister says he's considered several options. Has the government done a full risk assessment on the resilience, the long-term resilience of the service if these changes go ahead? If so, will they publish it? And has he considered changing the law so that there can be a call-out charge which is classified differently with HMRC, so that they can continue as volunteers but continue to be remunerated for their dedicated service?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, when I was in Southampton a few days ago, it was explained to me the intricacies, the difficulties and the horribleness, ultimately, of mud rescue. And I think that the Honourable Lady makes that point very powerfully, that for people who are not active CROs, it is difficult to be able to understand the level of commitment that is required to carry out this dangerous work in the service of people that they have never met. In regard to changing the law and legislative carve-outs, I've been quite clear that while there are options that would facilitate this, it is not a quick fix. It is not something that will give CRO certainty in the moment, but it is something that has been considered. In regard to operational risk, may I just confirm and reassure her that impact modelling based on data is carried out by the MCA to inform the recommendation that was made. Robust contingency plans do exist across the search and rescue capability of the Coast Guard and other services to respond to people in distress across the United Kingdom, but we do not want to get into that situation, and that is exactly why I've said what I've said to the House today.
James Wild.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Coastguard Rescue Officers I've met from Hunstanton responded to 150 emergency shouts last year, and the small payment helped them to perform this role for locals and visitors alike. But with 50% of officers in East Anglia saying they would quit or reduce availability, is the Minister really prepared to take responsibility for the risk to public safety, or will he simply stop these changes from coming into effect in September now, whilst we work on a long-term solution?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a process that we need to work through strategically and methodically to ensure that we are taking the right decision based on data and the lived experience of CROs. That is why I've paused the engagement this week to allow us to get a better read of that situation more clearly, and that will inform my approach going forward.
Benn Lake.
Speaker, can I firstly thank the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland for securing this important urgent question. The Coastguard Rescue Officers from Ceredigion and Preseli that I've spoken to in recent weeks have all shared a common concern. The first being that as many as half of their colleagues in the Coastguard Service will reconsider their positions should this new proposed model come into effect. And secondly, just as important, is the impact on partner emergency services. And so, with regards to some of the statements that the MCA leadership have made on the operational impact of these changes, could the Minister ensure that these assessments and these modelling are made public so that we can properly scrutinise them and have confidence that we understand the consequences of this decision before it is made?
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. He points to a very important fact that the MCA CROs conduct their work alongside other emergency services and full-time employees of the MCA, and we need to take all of those operational impacts into account. In response to another question, I said that I've instructed officials to determine what can be shared in relation to this process, and I will have more to say on that in due course.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, I'm sure the Minister will join me in paying tribute to the team at the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre in Bridlington who keep people safe all the way from Northumberland down to Suffolk across 250 miles of coastline, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And these proposed changes to make CROs unpaid is just one of the problems facing the Maritime and Coastal Agency. There are issues nationally around recruitment and retention, understaffed teams in high-pressure environments working long hours leading to stress and sickness, and pay that isn't commensurate with other emergency services. So can I ask the Minister to ensure that the agency is appropriately resourced, but also that the agency is putting that resource into the right place to ensure that our frontline teams have the tools they need?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman will know that both myself and my constituents are no strangers to Bridlington and what a wonderful place it is to visit, but that means that the CROs who work there to protect us need to be given the tools that they need to carry out their vital work. A broader review of the MCA is taking place, which will look at exactly the questions which the Honourable Gentleman raises, and I will ensure that he plays his part in that process so that we come to the right answers.
Andrew George.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Minister knows, there's almost 150 miles of coastline around my West Cornwall and Isles of Scilly constituency. At the top of the question, rather the answer the Minister gave earlier, he said the model has to change, but it doesn't need to be trashed. He also referred to the fact that the remuneration arrangements to the CROs are bespoke, but so are bespoke arrangements provided to special constables, to retained firefighters. Surely the Minister and his colleagues can find a model that meets the legal obligations and remains a bespoke remuneration system for CROs.
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman is right to the fact that there are a number of operative models for volunteers, and I can assure him that I'm looking at what the long-term options are to ensure that CRO's volunteering model is respected. We had an exchange in Westminster Hall about how the retained fire service model creates implications, but I understand the fact that he is just pushing me to have a broad lens on what the solutions might be, and I thank him for doing so.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On January the 2nd, Grace and Sarah Keeling and Mark Mark Ratcliffe, tragically lost their lives in the seas at Withensea. Through that day and late into the night, Coastguard rescue officers fought in the most terrible conditions to save lives. They did so out of duty, not for remuneration. When thousands and thousands of people go to the coast this summer onwards, how can the Minister ensure that they can continue to rely on courageous Coastguard rescue officers in future as they've been able to in the past? And will he show, I appreciate what he said today, but can he show even greater urgency in recognising the need to make this change, because September is just weeks away, and these people who rely on this to do this heroic work deserve quick answers.
May I thank him for raising the tragic case of what happened to Grace, Sarah and Mark, and my condolences to their families. He is right to say that this is not a theoretical question. We have an urgent need to address this issue now to ensure that we can do what we need of CROs, which is for them to carry out this phenomenal public service and to retain safety and operational capacity across the country. He encourages me to go further, faster, and I've heard the call that he has made.
Jess Brown-Fuller.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Coastguard rescue officers that I've spoken to in Selsey, in my constituency, do their job out of a real sense of duty. Many of them have done it for many years. It's not actually at all about the remuneration, but the reality is that some of them will have to take on additional paid work if they lose that very small amount of money that is given to them by the government to recognise their value. So I asked the Minister, will he please come to Selsey, which is an isolated coastal community, to talk to my CROs so that he can see the brilliant work they're doing, but also the value that they give that community.
I have no doubt about the contribution that CROs in Selsey make, and I would be happy to engage with the Honourable Lady's constituents on this issue. She raises the particular issue that for rural communities, these impacts might be felt especially keenly. That's why it is critical as we continue to engage with CROs, and I will continue to engage with CROs across the country, that we do so with the geographic lens which she describes, to make sure that we can pick up all of the operational complexities about what future options could mean.
David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, in Exmouth and Exeter East, the local Coastguard rescue team covers the ex-estuary, mud flats, tidal waters and busy open coastline, and is called on when local people and visitors cut off by the tide, trapped in mud, in difficulty in the water or at risk of self-harm. Now, the Minister says that a move to an expense-only model is needed following the Court of Appeal judgments. But the House is also told that an impact assessment has already combined incident demand, survey data, demographics, employment information and financial analysis. So will he therefore publish that assessment as soon as possible, including any modelling for Devon and high-demand coastal areas such as Exmouth? And most importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, can he guarantee that the charge will not proceed unless he is satisfied that he will not reduce Coastguard rescue officer availability, weaken emergency resilience in communities such as mine?
May I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his robust defence of CROs in his constituency and the incredible contribution that they make in his local area. I've already confirmed to the House that I've instructed officials to determine what can be shared to make sure that he is able to carry out his role of holding me to account and representing CROs. But in the meantime, may I just continue to thank the CROs in his constituency, who he is such a powerful advocate for carrying out their essential work.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This decision is clearly a kick in the teeth for brave people like Chris from my constituency of Mid-Dorset North Pool, who is worried that this will make the situation regarding their rights for whistleblowing worse. He challenged a bullying culture, was terminated and then denied his 20-year-long service medal. But this isn't about money, is it? Because the CRO's payments only equate to 1.5% of the agency's income. And while I understand my colleague from Cornwall's comments about on-call firefighters, has the Minister considered options like the allowances paid to counsellors, which do not confer any employment rights and which allow people to do this alongside their full-time employment?
The Honourable Lady is right to identify the fact that for CROs, remuneration isn't something that is the reason why they volunteer, but it allows them to do that volunteering work. She points to a number of options around what future models could consist of. I can confirm to her that a range of options have been considered, and the reason that I have paused the meetings that are happening this week is to create the space to allow CROs' voices to be heard and for that conversation to continue.
Marie Goldman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Since October last year, I've been taking part in a scheme called the Parliamentary Knowledge Scheme, specifically for frontline services that comes from the auspices of Mr. Speaker. And as part of that scheme, we visited the MCA and met CROs, and indeed I took part in a training exercise about rescuing from muddy situations. So I know firsthand the fabulous work that they do, but of course they're not the only voluntary search and rescue organisation out there. Yeah. And I know that many other volunteer SAR organisations are very worried about the implications of this for them. So I wonder if the Minister can tell me what assessment he has made of the impact on other maritime search and rescue organisations such as the RNLI and other independent lifeboat associations.
The full impact on search and rescue capability and operational capacity has been considered through this process, but she is absolutely right to point to the fact that it's critical that we continue to interpret what CROs are telling us about what the impact of this will be and rationalise that with how we project demand to flow over the summer and into September. I did miss something, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the previous question, which was just around the very serious charge around whistleblowing. Could the Honourable Lady please write to me about those specific instances? But the Right Honourable Lady to whom I'm currently answering is right to raise these very important issues.
Can I thank the Minister for his answers this afternoon? And can I also remind members that large slogans are not appropriate, and perhaps members might do up their jacket so I can't see it. If I'd spotted it, I wouldn't have called the Right Honourable Member, who has been... Point of order, Freddie Van Mierlo.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sorry, on a point of order, on the 2nd of June, myself, the Honourable Member for Didcot and Wantage, Oxford West and Abingdon, Bicester and Woodstock and Witney, sent a letter to the Right Honourable Member for Ealing North concerning decommissioning of important mental health services in Oxfordshire, including the Infant Parent Perinatal Service, the Child and Adolescent Harmful Behaviour Service, and the Family Assessment and Safeguarding Service. We invited the Secretary of State to exercise powers under the Health and Care Act of 2022 to call in the decision. I'm aware that ministerial correspondence with members has a 20-day timeframe to respond. However, this has passed. Normally, Madam Deputy Speaker, when this occurs, I tend not to chase it, but this has a really important time-sensitive nature, and I do seek your guidance on how we may receive a response from the Department.
Can I thank the Honourable Member for his point of order? This is a matter for government ministers rather than the Chair, but ministers are expected to provide timely responses to correspondence from members. The front bench will, I have no doubt, be able to pass his concerns on to the relevant minister, and the Honourable Member will of course have the opportunity to raise this issue with the Leader of the House at Business Questions tomorrow. Which brings us to Royal Assent. I have to notify the House, in accordance with the Royal Assent Act 1967, that the King has signified his Royal Assent to the following acts and measures: National Security State Threats Act 2026, Clergy Conduct Measure 2026. Which brings us to presentation of Bill. Sarah Champion.
Public Procurement, British Goods and Services Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 4th of September, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Friday the 4th of September. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Chris Coughlin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I move that leave be given to bring a bill to require persons discharging functions on behalf of certain other persons to assess the mental capacity of those persons in specified circumstances and for connected purposes. At issue is the devastating misuse of the Mental Capacity Act 2005, which has resulted in hundreds of preventable deaths. King's College London found 160 of these deaths in 2023 alone. This bill is in honour of Christopher Lascaris, whose mum Fiona is here. Christopher was not unlike many autistic children. He was a sensitive and intelligent boy who once asked his mum to stop on the way to school to rescue a lamb stuck in a fence. I first met Fiona when I was 8. I'd stayed in my bedroom and ignored her. Perhaps I was angry that she was buying my home off my dad. My mum had died a few months after I was born, and I was a sensitive boy. Well, they moved in. Christopher grew up in my childhood bedroom, and he loved the house as much as I did. But as a young autistic man living alone in Leeds, he was in danger. Despite Fiona raising credible doubts about his capacity, on numerous occasions over 8 years, she was never able to secure the mental capacity assessment that she needed to protect him. Horrifically, Christopher was exploited and murdered in his home by a man who had just been released from jail. Christopher was 24. Under this bill, Christopher would have been granted that mental capacity assessment, and he might still be with us. I've been working with Fiona for over 2 years to close this loophole. We have worked cross-party. We have worked with the government, and we have worked with ITV, who've mounted a national campaign exposing this injustice across the country. I am grateful for all this and the result, that the government has committed to review and reform the Mental Capacity Act. This bill offers an opportunity to realise that commitment. The Mental Capacity Act states, a person must be presumed to have capacity unless it is established that he lacks capacity. Too often, public officials have used this presumption to not take action, failing vulnerable people. Because if a person's capacity is merely in doubt, but not yet established as lacking, then they are presumed to have capacity and too easily disregarded. This bill has been drafted by one of the most prominent mental capacity lawyers in the country, Alex Ruck-Keene, KC, Honorary King's Counsel. It has 2 key clauses. A duty to assess capacity where a person is reasonably understood to have an impairment or disturbance in their functioning of their mind or brain, and a duty to assess capacity where a person properly interested in the person's circumstances has raised a concern as to their capacity. Although these safeguards are in the existing code of practice, they are too often ignored. This bill seeks to bring these existing safeguards into law to mandate compliance. It will enhance the presumption of capacity because it will ensure that it is not used against people to their cost or the cost of others. Charlie Gooding. His mum, Annabelle, is here. Charlie had Prader-Willi syndrome, which in his case gave him a genetic compulsion to overeat. Annabelle repeatedly begged authorities for help. They repeatedly ignored her. She locked the food cupboards, but she could not prevent Charlie from buying food or going to food banks. Ultimately, his weight reached 30 stone and he ate himself to death. Charlie was 35. Under this bill, authorities would have had to grant Annabelle that assessment, and Charlie might still be with us. Harley Watson. His mum, Jo, is here. Harley was 12 years old when he died, after paranoid schizophrenic Terence Glover drove a car into a crowd of school children. Glover had told the police beforehand repeatedly in 999 calls that he intended to run over and kill school children. The police knew about his paranoid schizophrenia diagnosis and they knew about his impaired judgment, yet they took no action. Under this bill, the police would have had to have referred Glover for a mental capacity assessment, which might have saved an innocent 12-year-old boy. In 2014, a House of Lords Select Committee recognised the failures in the Mental Capacity Act. These past 12 years, Parliament has failed to act. The cost in lives lost is unimaginable. Amongst the hundreds of dead, Fiona lost to Christopher. Annabelle lost her Charlie. Jo lost her Harley. These three mums are here today, not only in grief, but also with the highest of all hope, to save lives. I commend their courage and this bill to the House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Madam Speaker, Ed Davey, Danny Chambers, Jeremy Hunt, Andy Slaughter, Florence Eshalamomi, John Grady, Weir Hobhouse, Liz Jarvis, Vicky Slade, Manuela Pertigela, Ben Maguire, and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Mental capacity, duty to assess bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 29th of January.
Friday, the 29th of January 2027. I will allow a couple of moments for the front benches to swap over. We now come to the backbench debate on UK rearmament and war fighting readiness. Mike Martin to move.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The key word of the motion on the order paper today is rapid. Rapid rearmament, not eventual rearmament, not rearmaments with an asterisk, rapid rearmament. And the reason that that is the key word is because the clock is not ours to choose. So 3 weeks ago, before the Defence Investment Plan came out, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "It is our intelligence assessment and the assessment of other countries in NATO that there could be an attack by Russia on NATO as soon as 2030. Madam Deputy Speaker, the deadline is not contested. Intelligence confirms it. NATO proclaims it. They are speaking of this in Ankara today, and our government accepts it. We must be ready by 2030. And this is why the Defence Investment Plan is so maddening. I've read it from cover to cover. I'm that kind of guy. And I cannot wrap my head around it. It fails the test of its own threat assessment. It does not go far enough, and what it does do, it does too slowly, and large parts of it are unfunded. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is too little, too late, and there is not enough cash. So it's worth considering how this plan came into being. So Lord Robertson, who was the lead author of the Strategic Defence Review, wanted to have the DIP, so that's the money bit, as an annex to the SDR. And this is really good practice when you're making strategy. You set out a vision, that's the SDR, and then you set out your DIP, your investment plan, that's the resources. And if you don't have the resources to deliver your vision, you either need to downgrade your vision somewhat, or you need to increase your resources. And this decoupling of the two by a year, the vision in the SDR a year ago, and the money, the resources in a DIP just recently, is the greatest failure of statecraft committed by this Labour government in the 2 years that it has been in office. So allow me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to speak about the money in some detail. I think quite well ventilated in the media is the £4.7 billion that quite blatantly is to be found in the next budget in the autumn. And whilst the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield has said that he intends to fund defence seriously, he has not specifically said that he will find those sums in that budget. And as the government repeatedly tells us, defence of the realm is the most important duty of any government. So why is £5 billion of that sacred duty in the next Chancellor, persons unknown at this point, why is it in their in-tray? Secondly, I'd like to talk about these efficiency savings, £10.7 billion of them. And the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, when he was sitting just over there, called this the oldest accounting trick in the book. And if you dig just one layer below and look at the detail of this, 2.4 billion of that £10.7 billion are what the MOD calls high maturity initiatives. That's a quote. And I find it's always worth really looking into what the MOD says, because the remaining 8.4 billion of that nearly £11 billion of efficiency savings is what the MOD calls lower maturity plans. Lower maturity plans, Madam Deputy Speaker, is MOD speak for we haven't worked out how to deliver those savings yet. And thirdly, and most egregiously, and this is the theme that I will keep returning to, is that this is a dip of two halves. We have the period from now until 2030, and this is covered by the current spending review, subject to the caveats that I laid out earlier. But there is a further bit from 2030 to 2035 that has to be confirmed in a forthcoming spending review. And so if a future Chancellor or Prime Minister doesn't agree to those sums going into the next spending review, due in the spring of 2027, one assumes, then the dip doesn't exist. It's just an unfunded piece of paper. I will give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way, and he's making an excellent speech. Would he agree with me that not only does that near-term investment period cover until the next election, the first 4 years, the second half, the longer-term investment period, covers the next 5 years, all the way up to 2035. But the DIP is a 10-year plan, and so should in fact go beyond 2035 and beyond 2 elections' time to 2036. And it clearly does not mention that, because the number 2036 does not appear in the Defence Investment Plan once.
Well, I think this actually speaks to the delay. Had the dip come up when it was meant to in 2025, it would be a 10-year plan, because it would go 2025 to 2035. But the government was unable to get its ducks in line, and so it was delayed by a year. But you know, for them to then rejig the plan and do it to 2036, I mean, we'd be waiting till 2040 to get the plan. So this is a dip of two halves, and most of the investment, and this is the really worrying bit, most of the investment is in the second half that is unfunded. And I'll just give you some examples. In the air domain, it's 27.8 billion before 2030, 70 billion after, unfunded. In the maritime domain, it's 18 billion before 2030, 32 billion after, unfunded. In the land domain, 19.2 billion before, 36 billion afterwards, unfunded. Weapons and munitions, 11.1 billion before, 20 billion after, unfunded. It beggars belief. Why bother publishing a plan when, by my calculations, almost 2/3 of the investments that you seek to make are in the second half that is unfunded? And one of the reasons that we have pulled this plan together is to give certainty to industry so they know how to invest. But I will.
My concern that the only British company offering to build an advanced jet trainer replacement for the Red Arrow's Hawk jet called Duralis has gone into receivership because of the delays on the DIP, meaning they won't assemble those lovely British jets in my constituency.
So the firm in the Honourable Gentleman's constituency, I think we all have stories either whether it's in our constituencies or that we know from the conversations that we have as members of Parliament who are interested in defence, it has been catastrophic for British industry. And rushing out an unfunded DIP, which is effectively what this is, has not helped. It's meant that for some small investments, 1/3 of the total pot for the next 4 years, small capital investments can be made by firms. But anything that stretches beyond 2030, nobody can for sure make that investment.
Would you like very briefly?
I will. And then
I thank you, mate. He's making a very accurate critique. Is he aware that at lunchtime today, the Treasury Select Committee, led by the redoubtable Honourable Lady for Hackney, were looking at defence funding, and in that hearing, barely an hour ago, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury admitted, under persistent questioning, the government has done no work on how to get to 3.5% of GDP on defence.
All I will say is that defence of the realm is the most serious issue for any government. And I will...
He's very kind, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he's right in the middle of unpicking the DIP thread by thread. But does he agree with me that we need to look at the manifest and substantial disappointment that we and all of the people in uniform see in the DIP now that it's announced, and try and reconcile that with how delayed it was? What does he think the government were doing, given that there's so many black holes and missing spaces in the DIP? What does he think they were debating over those 11 months that the DIP was delayed?
The original sin is the divorcing of the Strategic Defence Review and the DIP, the vision from the resources. And for the previous year, the department has first been arguing with itself about whether it can downgrade some of the things in the Strategic Defence Review. And there are a couple of things where that's happened, as I'll come to those. And then been arguing with the Treasury as to whether they can get more money to fill the gap. Effectively, they wrote a vision that was far too grand for the money that was ever going to be available. So let me turn from the money to the metal and have a look at some of the capabilities. And I could give a very, very long speech of military analysis about which capabilities should be in or out of the DIP. I won't do that. I think it would test... I know that honourable and right honourable members would want me to do that. Perhaps I will start up a Substack or something. And, but let's look at the Royal Navy, the senior service. And at the turn of this century, which someone born in 1982, it still feels very weird for me to say that, but at the turn of this century, we had 20 frigates. The UK had 20 frigates. By the end of this year, we will have 5. And pre-DIP, they were scheduled to go out of service in 2035. And in a little noticed line in the DIP, actually we're bringing forward that date. So now our frigates, all 5 of them are well beyond their service date. They're going out of date in 2033. And their replacements, the Type 26s and the Type 23s, are going to be coming into service, you guessed it, between 2030 and 2035. So what we have is old ships retiring on a fixed schedule and new ships coming in on an unfunded one. And by my back of a fag packet maths, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to be honest, it's probably about the same quality of analysis as is going in the MOD under this government, but we will have 3 frigates in 2030. And this is the year, supposedly, according to our own intelligence assessments, of maximum Russian threat against NATO. We need a frigate to protect our cables. We need a frigate to get the carrier group out at sea. We need a frigate for our deterrent. And rule of 3s, for every 3 ships, you can only have 1 at sea at any one time. That's 9 frigates. And there's no contingency in that. So if anything else kicks off in the Middle East or anywhere else, there's no contingency. But you can see straight away that there's a huge gap, the frigate gap, as many are calling it. And the DIP has made the frigate gap much worse. And the picture with our current Type 45 destroyers and their replacements is not much better. So our Type 45s, which provide air defence primarily, we had one parked in the Thames estuary to defend the Olympics in 2012, for instance, because we don't have any other air defence. They go out of service from 2035. And their replacements are meant to be these crude common combat vessels like motherships, and around them are meant to be arranged various autonomous ships that provide missiles or sensors or underwater, above water. So there's a whole fleet of different ships that are meant to replace the destroyers and some other elements of a navy. This was the hybrid navy that was much touted last week with the media around the dip. And to be clear to the House, I am totally in favour of moving towards autonomy as fast as we possibly can. It is worth saying, however, that the maritime domain is the most difficult domain to do autonomy in, particularly the High North. I have spent quite a lot of time at sea, and I can tell you, everything breaks all the time. And there is a reason why the maritime domain is the last domain to be autonomised. We started with air, because that's quite predictable, quite easy to do. They still don't fly in bad weather. And then we went on to ground stuff to pick up casualties and drop off ammunition. But the idea that we can, and these new ships, these common combat vessels, are PowerPoints at the moment. So we expect to go from PowerPoints to power projection on the high seas in 9 years, with not just one class of ships, but several classes of ships that have to work together. That seems quite risky to me. And I think if you take these two things together, what's happening to the frigate fleet and what is happening to the destroyer fleet, I think it's fair to say that the dip is spelling the end of the Royal Navy as we know it. I will to the former Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would the honourable gentleman agree with me that from sail to ironclad, ironclad to dreadnought, dreadnought to highly capable frigate, we need to make the next generational leap? And if we find ourselves caught into programmes now that deliver last year's capability, we will remove any wriggle room or space to make that jump into autonomy and automation.
I absolutely do agree with everything the member for Birmingham, Selly Oak, has just said. Thank you. However, all I'm highlighting is that on past performance, to go from PowerPoints to ships at sea in 9 years for several classes of ship seems extremely risky. And moreover, come back to the dip, only £1.3 billion has been set aside in this first funded period to set up that entire class of ships, and the remainder of the investment falls beyond 2030. And so it seems risky. I want to move to autonomy. I think that's the right thing to do, but that seems like an incredibly risky bet.
My honourable friend, go great.
I will make a little bit of progress, and then I will, if that's okay. Because I'm having eyes made at me by Madam Deputy Speaker.
I would want to interrupt that.
Keep going. Keep going.
So then there is the Global Combat Air Programme, and the DIP commits £8.6 billion to this. So this is the 6th generation fighter jet that we're building with Italy and Japan. And really, we're probably going to get these in service sometime after 2040. And it's a manned fighter jet. So what I would ask the House is just to cast their minds forward to beyond Putin's death. Putin will probably be buried by this point. And ask yourself, in 2040, are we going to have humans flying fighter jets? I think the answer is no, and I know that the Minister is an ex-pilot, so he will always argue for humans in fighter jets. But allow me to lay out my argument. And I think when you dig into GCAP, what you find is that the reason it's a crewed system rather than an uncrewed system is because that is what the Japanese partners wanted. So I'm afraid I'm not going to, if that's okay, because I want to. So what we are doing is we are privileging a diplomatic relationship a good diplomatic relationship that would weather the storm of us pulling out of GCAP. We're privileging diplomacy over military capability. And I think what we have to look at is whether we want manned fighter jets in 40 years or whether we want a Royal Navy right now. Do we want frigates and destroyers in the next 4 years? Do we want to transition effectively in a funded way to a hybrid navy? Or do we want manned fighter jets to arrive in 2040? Madam Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, the same story repeats wherever you look. Deep precision strike, early 2030s. Nuclear-enabled F-35s,
Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4, speaking today at Bedfordshire Police Headquarters. 1, 2, 3, 4. I took the train today from central London, speaking at a normal volume. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Normal speaking volume is about here.
Lost him. So we'll give it a minute or two, hopefully he'll come back. Hopefully he doesn't. Yeah, I was just going to grab your attention.
Won't be doing that much.
Oh, sorry. Yes, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Yep.
I am Detective Inspector Lee Martin, the Senior Investigating Officer from the Major Crime Unit. We have been carrying out a number of lines of inquiry as part of this fast-paced, complex investigation into the death of a woman and her 2 children. We know that the suspect, who we are naming today as Endordana Mkanyezi Chuma, also known as Mark, left the country on Saturday using a British passport. He is now believed to be in Zimbabwe. Mark, I am now speaking to you directly. Unthinkable harm has been caused to those around you. 3 innocent people have lost their lives in the worst possible circumstances, leaving your relatives and friends devastated. We are throwing the full weight of the law behind this investigation. Criminal investigations know no borders. We are actively working with national and international agencies to pursue every available line of inquiry to track you down. And we will find you. So please, do the right thing, come forward and hand yourself in to local authorities. Our thoughts are still very much with those who have lost their lives, as well as all of those who loved and knew them at this extremely difficult time. Thank you.